Chapter 724. Yu Qian had indeed given Wu Qi an extra great benefit. As mentioned earlier, the natural energy in Yuxiong Plain and Liangzhu, as well as the natural treasures produced in Yuxiong Plain, were all beyond the imagination of ordinary people. To put it bluntly, a day's cultivation in Yuxiong Plain was comparable to a year's cultivation in any other place on Panga continent, and it was comparable to 100 or even 1,000 years of cultivation in outer heavenly realms. But, the forbidden law of Deyu dynasty stipulated that, except for the people of Deyu who lived in Yuxiong Plain and Liangzhu for generations, the local officials in Yuxiong Plain, and the courtiers in Liangzhu, no other courtiers were allowed to enter Yuxiong Plain without the human emperor's permission. For a marquis of province like Wu Qi, apart from having a chance to visit Yuxiong Plain when he was being conferred a title, and staying in Yuxiong Plain for no more than half a month, he would never have the chance to visit Yuxiong Plain again, unless he made a great contribution and was promoted again. Even a member of Deyu imperial clan like Gao had no right to enter Yuxiong Plain at will before Emperor Haozuan appointed him to be a counselor in military affairs. When he was still King Yangqiu, he could only stay in his fief and roam freely in other places on Panga continent, except for Yuxiong Plain. If he dared to violate the ban, he might be stripped of his title or even imprisoned. But this time, Emperor Haozuan appointed him to be a counselor in military affairs, giving him a specific position in the imperial court like his father, King Yangshan. It was tantamount to him having a pass to enter and leave Yuxiong Plain at will, and he could live there all year round. Therefore, when he was conferred a title, he was not very excited about it. But when he received Emperor Haozuan's special edict, he could hardly contain his excitement. Yu Qian told Wu Qi that as long as he could comprehend some new ideas about formations, he could come to Yantian Palace and exchange pointers with the supreme oracles. This was tantamount to Yu Qian giving Wu Qi the right to enter and leave Yuxiong Plain and Liangzhu at will. If Wu Qi could come up with some strange formations from time to time and purposely communicate with these high priests for a few months or years, he would gain a lot of benefits. With Wu Qi's chaotic constitution, if he could cultivate for 3 to 5 years in a place like this, where one day of cultivation was equivalent to a year of cultivation in any other place on Panga continent, how far could his cultivation base improve? Just by looking at the number of sun oracles in Yantian Palace who were in their early 20s, one could tell that the benefits of cultivating in Liangzhu were simply too great. If I learn something new, I will certainly come to Liangzhu city to have a talk with you elders. Wu Qi looked at Yu Qian with glowing eyes and said, "But, how can I?" Before Wu Qi could finish his words, Yu Qian took out a palm-sized silver jade token from his sleeve and handed it to Wu Qi. The token was half an inch thick and about the size of a palm. Faint starlight could be seen swirling in its silver surface, and its surface was engraved with countless detailed maps of stars, emanating a frightening energy fluctuation. "This is the token of the first master of Yantian Palace," said Yu Qian disapprovingly. "With it, you can come and go as you please. Who would dare to make things difficult for you?" Laughing complacently, Yu Qian shook his head and said, "If you learn something in the future, just go to the imperial palace with this token, and someone will bring you to Yantian Palace." At this point, Yu Qian frowned and said, "No, only you can use this token. You can't let anyone take it away from you." Grabbing Wu Qi's hand, Yu Qian made a cut on Wu Qi's wrist with his fingernail. A large amount of blood sprayed out, and a threatening starlight flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, Wu Qi's blood condensed into a small map of stars consisting of 17,200 stars in the air, which then merged with the token. Immediately, the silver jade token was covered with a faint layer of blood-red light, and the energy fluctuation emanating from it was filled with a vigorous life force. The blood-red light fluctuated, as if it was echoing with Wu Qi's heartbeat from a distance. Yu Qian smiled and said, "I've added a blood curse to the token, so it can't be separated from you for more than 3 feet. If someone tries to snatch it from me, he or she will be killed by the backlash from the blood curse. Someone with a higher cultivation than this old man." Wu Qi gave the 6 black supreme towers pattern on Yu Qian's sleeve a glance and shook his head. Why would someone stronger than Yu Qian need to snatch the token from Wu Qi? If he were a primordial immortal from the celestial court, he would be killed by Deyu even if he entered Yuxiong Plain with the token. If he were an oracle from the Directorate of Celestials, he or she would be an elder from either the Directorate of Celestials or the Secret Palace. Why would they want to snatch Wuqi's token? Yu Chen let out a strange laugh and said, if someone with a stronger cultivation base than me tries to snatch this token, as this token leads directly to the core of Yan Tian Palace's defensive formation, don't blame me for joining hands with the other 8 masters and elders of Yan Tian Palace to teach him a lesson. The corner of Wuqi's mouth twitched. The 8 masters of Yan Tian Palace? Their cultivation bases should be about the same as Yu Chen's, right? Even though the cultivation bases of the elders of Yan Tian Palace were not as strong as Yu Chen, there should be a small gap between them, right? On top of that, there was also the defensive formation of Yan Tian Palace, and they still wanted to join hands to teach him a lesson. How shameless! The primordial immortals of the Celestial Court would never do something so shameless, but he reckoned that this group of mad scientists from Yan Tian Palace could really be so shameless. Laughing complacently, Yu Chen shoved his token into Wuqi's hand, then told Wuqi to wait outside the hall while he strode into the hall. This hall housed all the ancient books of Yan Tian Palace. Apart from the various profound mysteries of the Tao of formation comprehended by many oracles, there were also many other strange and bizarre collections. Before the death of the masters and elders of Yan Tian Palace, they would leave some of their belongings in this hall. Among them, there were some elders who had lost their lineage and had no descendants to inherit their magical artifacts. Therefore, they left the powerful magical artifacts that they had spent countless years refining in this hall. Therefore, only the 9 masters and the elders of Yan Tian Palace had the right to enter this hall. Apart from them, no one was allowed to step into this hall. Even though Yu Chen, the first master of Yan Tian Palace, could give Wuqi the privilege to enter and leave Liangzhu at will, he could not violate the ban of Yan Tian Palace and allow Wuqi to step into this hall. After waiting outside the hall for a quarter of an hour, Wuqi saw Yu Chen slowly walking out of the hall with a silver crystal ball the size of a human head in his hand. Judging from the way he was walking, it was obvious that the silver crystal ball was very heavy, and was emitting waves of energy that were sometimes agile, sometimes heavy, and sometimes sluggish. Even though there was still a long distance between it and Wuqi could sense that the energy waves emanating from it were very strange. It was as if all the stars in the sky had been compressed into this crystal ball, and it was emitting the energy waves that were unique to all the stars in the universe. The energy waves coming from the countless stars were different, and that was why it had such an unpredictable and ever-changing aura. On top of that, not only the bizarre ripples of energy, but the silver crystal ball itself had also made Wuqi slowly open his mouth wide in astonishment. In the end, his mouth had been opened to its limit, and his jaw nearly dislocated. Based on the description of the various extraordinary treasures found in the Scroll of Stealing, Wuqi recognized the origin of this silver crystal ball. Heaven above, Wuqi really had the thought of looting the entire Deyu's secret palace. The silver crystal ball that Yu Chen carefully brought out was actually the core of an innate star. Before the great Saint Pangu created this world, there were many things in the chaos. The aura of chaos gave birth to all things, and there were all kinds of spirit objects living in it. The legendary supreme treasures of chaos were such treasures that were born in the chaos and then refined by someone. Each supreme treasure of chaos contained infinite mysteries. For immortals and Buddhist cultivators, if they had one with them, they would have the foundation to settle down and even found their own sections. There were also innate stars in the chaos. The so-called innate stars were nothing more than clumps of energy formed by the extreme condensation of chaotic energy. They contained countless mysteries of stars, and that was why they were called innate stars. Legend had it that the countless stars in the outer heavenly realms of Pangu continent were evolved from the fragments of innate stars that the great Saint Pangu had shattered. In fact, none of the so-called heavenly star formations could really make full use of the power of all the stars in the universe. Even primordial immortals could only use the power of the million celestial lords conferred by the celestial court to construct a so-called heavenly star formation. The reason why the celestial court was able to confer these celestial lords was that they had mastered the heavenly Tao represented by the corresponding stars. Therefore, they could fuse their aura with the stars, develop their true bodies, and become celestial lords. Only stars that had been mastered by someone could be used to set up formations with their star power. But the core of the innate star in front of Wu Qi was complete. It must contain a lot of origin great Tao. If the core of this innate star was shattered, and if enough energy could be gathered, it might be able to give birth to tens of thousands of stars. The origin great Tao contained in every innate star was completely different. That was to say, the great Tao contained in the core of this star was unfamiliar to those primordial immortals who stood high above the celestial court. This meant that if Wu Qi could master the core of this star and use it as the core to construct a formation, perhaps those mighty immortals could break the formation with brute force, but no one under the heaven could solve it. Yu Chen carefully came out with the star core in his hands. As he looked down at the silver core, he did not notice the shocked expression on Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi quickly shut his mouth and adjusted the expression on his face, then came up to Yu Chen and snatched the star core. "What is this, Master Yu?" Are all the books of Yan Tian Palace recorded in it?" Wu Qi asked Yu Chen as if nothing had happened. The core of this innate star was extremely heavy. Although it was only the size of a human head, it weighed nearly 50 million kilograms. No wonder Yu Chen had to be so careful to bring it out. As a pure oracle, Yu Chen did not have a strong fleshly body like Wu Qi. He had only brought it out with the help of magic. It's just an ordinary star core. My great-great-grandfather found it by accident when he was traveling through the starry sky in the outer heavenly realms. Initially, I thought it was the core of an ancient star, but after being studied by countless elders and masters of the past generations, I found that it is just an ordinary star core. Although it does not have all the magical powers of an ancient star core, it has a very large storage space. Among all the books of formations in Yan Tian Palace, it is the only one that can copy them all at once. Yu Chen shook his head and said with a wry smile, "If I were to use ordinary jade slips, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to copy all the books of formations in Yan Tian Palace without at least 10 million of them. Since I've agreed to give you a copy of all the books, I can only use this star core." Wild with joy, Wu Qi hastily bowed deeply and thanked Yu Chen. Heaven above, all the masters and elders of Yan Tian Palace in the past generations had failed to activate the magical innate star core in it. Could it be one of those things recorded in the scroll of stealing? Wu Qi felt like a hungry mouse who had suddenly fallen into a rice barn. Chapter 725. There was no doubt that it was the core of an innate star. However, even with the knowledge and means of Yu Chen and the other sect masters and elders of Yan Tian Palace, they still could not activate the various great Taos contained in it. It could only mean that it was not the core of an ordinary innate star, but the kaleidoscopic star core, which was recorded in the scroll of stealing and ranked in the top 100 of the primal, first-grade treasures. The kaleidoscopic star core was named after the fact that it contained everything. The great Taos contained in the core of an ordinary innate star were of the same category. For example, the great Taos contained in the core of an innate star were related to killing, bloodshed, violence, and the flames of war. The great Taos contained the principles of serious injury, tearing, sacrifice, and bloodshed. For example, the three most famous killing stars of the celestial court, slaughter, destruction, and wolf, were born in the same innate star during the primal chaos. Therefore, their star power and the principles they represented were of the same nature. Another example was that the great Taos contained in the core of an innate star were related to the fortune of a living being. In that case, the acquired stars formed after the breaking of a star might represent the fortune of fortune, longevity, offspring, and many other things. Of course, there were also negative fortunes, such as the acquired stars might represent the unlucky fortune of those who fell and broke their heads when they went out, got their teeth stuffed when they drank cold water, or hurt their heels when they farted. The innate principles contained in the core of most innate stars only pointed to a certain part, and the same went for the star power. Only some innate stars could devour and fuse with each other in the primal chaos, and the great Taos contained in them were not just a one-sided principle, but an all-encompassing one. It was not just a few or dozens of innate principles, but thousands, or even tens of thousands of different principles. Thousands or tens of thousands of principles might seem scary, but it was actually not that many. For example, the fire of the 5 elements included the stone flame, wood flame, water flame, high heavenly flame, sun flame, and so on. Even the divine flame of order, divine flame of void, and divine flame of great tranquility owned by Wu Qi were just a part of the great Tao of fire. The laws of fire could be divided into thousands or even tens of thousands of parts. Therefore, these tens of thousands of grand Taos weren't that many, not at all. However, it was already impressive enough for an ordinary star core to contain a few or even a few dozens of laws. Forcefully stimulating the star core with a secret art could stimulate the power of the laws, allowing the owner of the star core to understand the innate Taos contained within and form the foundation of his own Tao. However, the kaleidoscopic star core contained tens of thousands of laws, and all the laws were intertwined and fused with each other. In fact, it had already formed a small world within the star core. It was not so easy to use external forces to stimulate the laws contained within it. There was a technique in the scroll of stealing called Star Exploring Realm Palm Incantation, which was specifically used to deal with kaleidoscopic star cores, which were primal treasures that had evolved into an entire world. However, these oracles of Yen Tian Palace were experts in formations, so how could they possibly have such a magical technique? Perhaps the temple masters of the other branches of the secret palace have similar divine abilities? The problem was that the branches of the secret palace never got in touch with each other, and sometimes, there were even some minor conflicts between them. Therefore, it was impossible for the temple masters and elders of Yen Tian Palace to seek help from the people of other branches. Therefore, this kaleidoscopic star core, which contained countless innate Taos and had evolved into a small world within it, had fallen into Wu Qi's hands just like that. As soon as he took over the kaleidoscopic star core, which weighed at least 50 million kilograms, Wu Qi's heart began to race violently. In the scroll of stealing, there was a secret art that could fuse the kaleidoscopic star core with one's interstitial world, and then use the Star Exploring Realm Palm Incantation to stimulate the boundless great Tao contained in the kaleidoscopic star core, and then evolve the ancient starry sky in the interstitial world. Even the Buddhist kingdom in the palm of a Buddha of the Buddhist League could be broken by someone with brute force, because the power of the Buddhist kingdom in the palm had a limit, and so did the cultivation base of the Buddha. But, if Wu Qi could completely digest the kaleidoscopic star core and evolve the ancient starry sky in his interstitial world, transforming countless great Tao into stars and laying out a primordial star formation, there would be very few people under the heaven who could break his interstitial world. Once the immemorial starry sky in his interstitial world reached the phenomenal level, his interstitial world would possess the true power of a world. Whether it was used to imprison the enemy or to directly suppress and kill the enemy, it would be an invincible weapon. The various wonderful uses of the interstitial world were endless. Carefully holding the kaleidoscopic star core in his hands, Wu Qi bowed deeply to Yu Qin to express his gratitude, then opened his mouth and swallowed the kaleidoscopic star core, which was about the size of a human head. After cultivating the true body of heaven and earth scripture to the realm of gold immortal, Wu Qi's body had gone through some wonderful changes, and he now possessed some powerful divine abilities. For example, he could now open his mouth to a radius of 1,000 miles, and it was not difficult for him to swallow a mountain in one gulp. Looking at Wu Qi's cautious and respectful manner, Yu Qin happily patted Wu Qi's shoulder and said, "When you are tired of being the Marquis of East Sea Province, the position of Yen Tian Palace's teacher oracle will be ready for you." About my little daughter, do you want to visit her when you have time? Although she is only 1 month old, she is already a little beauty. Wu Qi stared blankly at Yu Qin. Why are you still thinking about your little daughter who is only 1 month old? As Yu Qin was about to try his best to promote his little daughter to Wu Qi and bring Wu Qi into Yen Tian Palace, he suddenly raised his eyebrows. His fingers moved quickly as he sneered and said, "Tan Lang, did you bring a black dragon with an ancient bloodline and 2 dragon pythons of fire and ice to the secret palace?" Wu Qi raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "Yes, I did." "Is there any trouble?" Yu Qin clenched his teeth and cursed, "Who dares to cause trouble to Yen Tian Palace? Damn you, Wu Changqi! How dare the 1,000 Spirit Palace cause trouble to Yen Tian Palace?" Grabbing Wu Qi's shoulder, Yu Chen twisted his body, and a supreme tower that was only about 30 feet tall emerged out of thin air. In the next moment, a beam of black light shot out and swallowed both him and Wu Qi. The surrounding void collapsed with a rumble, and numerous runes shot out of the supreme tower and sped away. At the entrance of the secret palace, the Dragon Python sisters were engaged in a fierce battle with the oracles of Thousand Spirit Palace led by Wu Changqi. Golden light that could melt gold and iron, and silver cold light that could freeze everything in the world shot into the sky, causing the surrounding cliffs to collapse. Large chunks of mountains with a radius of several miles and a thickness of several hundred meters would collapse, whistling down from the sky. Coupled with the huge rocks that were constantly collapsing in the surroundings, the scene was simply like doomsday. A black skeleton covered in blood hung over Wu Changqi's head. It looked like a human skeleton, but there were many sharp bone spikes growing out of its joints and a pair of long horns on its head. The skeleton was emitting a large sheet of dark light that shielded him and the disciples behind him. The oracles of Thousand Spirit Palace kept chanting spells and performing incantation gestures, while throwing all kinds of bone talismans and bone arrows at the Dragon Python sisters. But, the Dragon Python sisters had very strong fleshly bodies, and their scales were terrifyingly tough. No matter how many spells, bone talismans, and bone arrows fell on them, the most they could do was slightly crack their scales. The oracles guarding the entrance of the secret palace had long activated the defensive formation. Now, they were guarding the entrance with all their might, watching the fight between Wu Changqi and the Dragon Python sisters with indifferent faces. The oracles of the secret palace were well versed in the principle of staying aloof as long as it was none of their business. What Wu Changqi wanted to do, what the Dragon Python sisters wanted to do, had nothing to do with the oracles guarding the entrance. As long as they did not break into the secret palace and cause trouble, they would not be held responsible. Wu Changqi had to protect the disciples behind him, but his cultivation base was not very high. The reason why Wu Changqi could become the first hall master of the Thousand Spirit Palace was that he had made outstanding achievements in all kinds of strange research and had cultivated some strange creatures. But, Wu Changqi's cultivation base was only a so-so. He could suppress Ao Buzan with just one hand, but he could do nothing to the Dragon Python sisters. His body trembled violently as the strong gold and silver light that came smashing at him like a storm. The black skull hovering over his head produced a series of loud popping noises as some of its bones were melted, while others were frozen into thick ice flakes. It looked like Wu Changqi's magical artifact was about to be completely destroyed by the Dragon Python sisters. Just then, a strange howl rang out from the secret palace. Then, 3 oracles of the Thousand Spirit Palace, clad in white robes embroidered with the same pattern as the one on Wu Changqi's chest, rushed out of the palace. These 3 oracles looked very similar to Wu Changqi. They were the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th masters of Thousand Spirit Palace. Wu Changmei, Wu Changqi, and Wu Changqi. The 4 brothers from the Wu Chang family were the top 4 masters of Thousand Spirit Palace, and they were notorious figures in the secret palace. They never reasoned with others and did whatever they wanted. They were unscrupulous to the extreme. This was the first impression that outsiders had of the 4 spirits. Seeing that Wu Changqi was being beaten back and unable to fight back, then looking at the Dragon Python sisters hovering in midair and spraying out a rain of light, Wu Changmei, Wu Changqi, and Wu Changqi burst into laughter. Then, they slapped the back of their heads and unleashed 3 black skeletons that looked exactly the same as the one hovering over Wu Changqi's head. Accompanied by ear-piercing ghost howls, the 4 skeletons spun in the air, leaving behind thousands of ghostly shadows as they pounced at the Dragon Python sisters and Ao Buzan, who was lying on their heads. When Wu Changqi controlled 1 skeleton each, it only had a strong defense, but when the 4 brothers unleashed the strange black skeletons at the same time, the surrounding void was instantly sealed by the 4 skeletons, which had formed a formation. The Dragon Python sisters froze for a moment and could no longer move. Wu Changqi burst into laughter and said, "Take them down quickly. We'll have some good materials to use this time." The 3 brothers burst into wild laughter, bit the tip of their tongues and sprayed the blood at the skeletons they controlled. In an instant, the 4 skeletons, which were no taller than a man, expanded to 1,000 feet tall, stretched out their huge claws and grabbed at the dragon python sisters, who could no longer move because of the spatial seal. In the blink of an eye, a 30 feet tall supreme tower tore through the void next to the dragon python sisters. Yuchen gave a cold snort and threw out 12 low-grade energy stones, then performed an incantation gesture with both hands and pointed at those energy stones. The 12 energy stones instantly formed a Yuanchen grand array, shattering the surrounding void. Then, Wuqi rushed out of the supreme tower and lunged at the 4 Wuchang brothers. Bull-sized fists rained down like a meteor shower. Wu Changqi and his brothers let out miserable howls at the same time. Each of them had been punched dozens of times by Wu Qi, and more than half of their bones were broken. Howling, they were knocked flying away by Wu Qi. But, when the 4 brothers were less than 100 feet away, Wu Qi rushed to them, grabbed them by the neck and threw them to the ground. The 4 brothers were stacked into a pile. Then, Wu Qi stepped on the back of Wu Changqi, who was at the top of the pile. Instantly, the 4 brothers could no longer move. Snorting coldly, Wu Qi said in a ferocious voice, "Who hurt Lao Tzu's buddy just now?" Chapter 726. The alarm bell of the secret palace was still ringing intermittently, its deep, hoarse sound echoing through the cliffs and causing pain to the ears. However, apart from the hundreds of white-robed oracles who had gradually gathered at the entrance and activated a formation to protect the entrance, not a single high-ranking oracle of the secret palace had come out to deal with the matter. With his hands clasped behind his back, Yuchen was proudly pacing back and forth in the square at the entrance, his wrinkled face smiling like a blooming chrysanthemum. Did this not prove that Yantian Palace was much stronger than the Thousand Spirit Palace? Wu Qi had Wu Changqi and his brothers pinned to the ground and could not get up from the ground, while he himself had easily broken the formation that they had jointly constructed to seal off the void. As members of the secret palace, there was a strong competitive relationship between the various branches. Those who could join the secret palace were all mad scientists with slightly abnormal minds and low emotional intelligence. So, it was impossible to expect them to get along well with each other. This was especially so when the various branch palaces had different ideologies. You look down on me, I look down on you. Insults and fights between each other were commonplace. But today, when the 4 masters of the Thousand Spirit Palace were pinned to the ground and could not get up, it was something that had never happened since the establishment of the secret palace. Even though Yu Chen had once spat in Wu Changqi's face, he had never trampled Wu Changqi under his feet. But today, Wu Qi did just that. The 4 masters of the Thousand Spirit Palace and the Wuchang brothers were pinned to the ground by Wu Qi, unable to move at all. In Yu Chen's mind, Wu Qi was a genius in the Tao of formations, and sooner or later, he would become the principal oracle of Yantian Palace. Therefore, Wu Qi was already a member of Yantian Palace, and no one could deny that fact. A principal oracle of Yantian Palace had pinned down 4 masters of the Thousand Spirit Palace. Looking at the scene in front of him, Yu Chen could not help but feel a great sense of satisfaction. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he wanted to laugh out loud to mock Wu Changqi and his brothers. But, he had to consider his image as the first master of Yantian Palace, so he did not dare to laugh out loud. So, he could only pace back and forth, happily nodding at the oracles who were maintaining the mountain guarding formation at the entrance of the secret palace. Wu Qi kept the 4 brothers under his feet, and no matter how hard they struggled, they could not get up. The strongest of the 4 Wuchang brothers was only a 2nd Sun Oracle, which meant that their cultivation base was equivalent to that of a 14th tier gold immortal. So, when they were faced with Wu Qi, a freak who cultivated both fleshly body and magic power as strong as a 5th tier gold immortal, they felt as if dozens of mountains were pressing down on them, making them unable to move. Wu Changqi kept cursing Wu Qi's ancestors while performing incantation gestures with both hands, trying to move Wu Qi's foot away with a magic called mountain shifting spell. However, every time when his mountain shifting spell was about to take shape, the tip of Wu Qi's foot would shake violently, and an invisible wave of energy would shatter the spell to pieces, preventing him from unleashing the spell. When a 14th-tier gold immortal faced a 5th-tier gold immortal, it was like a baby facing an adult longbow man. Wu Changqi and his brothers kept chanting and performing hand seals, trying to summon some powerful magical weapons to deal with Wu Qi. However, Wu Qi's cultivation base was much stronger than theirs, and his physical strength was countless times stronger than theirs. No matter how hard they tried, they could not even budge Wu Qi's foot. The dragon python sisters shrunk their bodies to about a foot long and quickly landed on Wu Qi's shoulder, gently rubbing Wu Qi's earlobe with their heads. Ao Buzan, on the other hand, roared furiously as he enlarged his body to about 10 feet long. Then, he threw himself in front of Wu Changqi and growled, "Are you trying to cut open your ancestor's stomach? You want to use Lao Tzu to do those strange things? And you want to chop off a few kilograms of Lao Tzu's flesh and eat it?" All of a sudden, Ao Buzan opened his mouth and bit off one of Wu Changqi's arms, swallowing it in just a few bites. Wu Changqi howled miserably in pain. Blood mixed with a wisp of black smoke kept spraying out of the broken arm and soon stained the ground. Even Yu Qin was taken aback. He never dreamed that Ao Buzan could be so ferocious. It was one thing for Wu Qi to trample Wu Changqi to the ground and humiliate him. In any case, these masters of the secret palace were all people with abnormal minds, and they were used to being shameless. Last time, when Yu Qin spat saliva all over Wu Changqi's face, Wu Changqi merely rolled up his sleeve and wiped his face clean, as if nothing had happened. But now, Ao Buzan had bitten off Wu Changqi's arm. Something was not right. The dozens of disciples behind Wu Changqi roared furiously at the same time. Suddenly, their bodies began to swell, causing their white robes to burst apart. Among Wu Changqi's disciples were longbow men, feathermen, and even mermen, who could only live in the sea. Their white robes had covered their long tails, so no one could see through their identities. Apart from these most common races in Diyu, there were also some strange people among Wu Changqi's disciples. For example, there were a few members of the three-armed race who, in addition to their normal arms, had an extra arm in the middle of their bodies, either in front of their chests or on their backs. These three-armed race members had the same aptitudes as ordinary people, but the only unique feature was their third arm. Their third arms all had all sorts of wonderful innate abilities. Usually, the third arm was hidden within their body, but when needed, it could be summoned like a thunderbolt. Some members of the three-limbed race possessed the power to move mountains with their third arm. Some possessed a perfect and indestructible body of diamond. Some could control lightning bolts with their third arm, while some could control earth and fire and raging winds. Some even possessed the ability to shift stars. All of them were comparable to gold immortals. These three-armed race members had weak fleshly bodies, and their cultivation bases were not that strong. But, with the divine abilities and mystic arts that came with their third arm, they could often kill heaven immortals with ease, and even fight gold immortals to a draw. There were 7 three-armed race members among Wu Changqi's disciples. Seeing their master being humiliated by Wu Qi, and even having one of his arms bitten off by Ao Buzan, the 7 three-armed race members sprung up at the same time. Their bodies grew to about 20 feet tall, and one of their arms spread out before their chests and smashed down toward Wu Qi's head. When 2 of their palms swung down, vague mountain ranges could be seen rising and falling from their palms. These were 2 three-armed race members who had the power to move mountains. The other 2 arms were wreathed in flames, one of which was blue in color and emanated a chilly aura, while the other was crimson in color. Even though they were still a distance away from Wu Qi, he could already feel a great heatwave coming at him, burning even Wu Qi's hair. Among the last 3, one of them had starlight flickering in his palm, another had thunderclaps coming out of his arm, and the last one had blue waves bursting out of his palm. Inside his palm was a blue jellyfish, with boundless waves surging and rocking inside it. It looked very impressive. Wu Qi gave a cold snort, threw his head back and let out a long roar, and his body suddenly grew to about 50 feet tall. As he exercised the dragon kill, large patches of black dragon scales emerged from under Wu Qi's skin. 3 layers of dragon scales covered Wu Qi's body, and his defensive strength soared by 10 times. Spreading his palms, which were as large as a table, Wuqi gently waved all 10 of his fingers. A ghastly grayish-white airflow burst out from his palms, bringing with it the howling of ghosts. A chilly wind rose from the ground, wrapped in a white mist, and wrapped around Wuqi's body. Waving his palms, Wuqi thrust them towards the 3-armed race members, then exerted force with his feet. The 4 Wuchang brothers had their eyeballs protruding out of their sockets, while white foam kept bursting out from the corners of their mouths. Many of the poor brothers' bones had been broken by Wuqi's heavy punches, and now, when Wuqi's body grew even larger, the broken bones pierced into their muscles and internal organs, making them wail in pain. In the next moment, Wuqi's palms collided with the arms of 7 3-armed race members. 2 3-armed race members, whose palms had mountains rising and falling from them, exerted a force like a landslide, but Wuqi's divine strength was 100 times stronger than theirs. With just a slap, the arms of 2 3-armed race members were broken. Howling miserably, they were knocked flying several hundred feet away by Wuqi, falling to the ground and coughing up blood. On the other hand, 2 3-armed race members, whose palms were bursting with flames, had their palms smashed by Wuqi with a stream of cold energy and a stream of divine flame of order. One of their arms was frozen and shattered, while the other was burned into ashes. Both of them howled and fell to the ground with blood flowing out of their 7 apertures. As for the remaining 3 3-armed race members, they were teleported by Wuqi's palms, nullifying their attacks, shattering their arms and knocking them flying backward. Blood was spraying out of their mouths, and all their internal organs were severely injured. Meanwhile, the other disciples of Wu Changqi kept casting all kinds of spells at Wuqi. However, as Wuqi had a very strong fleshly body, and the defensive strength of his dragon scales was even more amazing. On top of that, he had unleashed a large number of runes to protect himself. None of these oracles were sun oracles, so how could they possibly hurt him? On the contrary, Wuqi had fed all the pressure brought by these spells back to the 4 Wuchang brothers, who had been firmly stomped by him. The heavy pressure made them scream, and Wu Changqi, who was the most severely injured, had already fainted. Loud roars echoed out of the secret palace as more than 1,000 oracles of Thousand Spirit Palace rushed out of the secret palace, led by a dozen old oracles. They spread out in all directions and unleashed all kinds of mystic techniques at Wuqi like a tidal wave. Yuqin gave a cold snort and pointed his finger out. Immediately, numerous dark blue pearls shot out and formed a minor heaven-een evil ghost formation around Wuqi and himself. Dozens of ferocious ghost heads were shooting out of each pearl, hovering in midair and greedily devouring all the mystic techniques that came at them. Immediately after that, angry curses rang out as a large group of oracles from Yen Tian Palace rushed out of the secret palace, led by dozens of old oracles. As soon as these oracles appeared, energy stones, immortal stones, formation flags, formation discs, golden and jade sabers, pearls, and een thunders flew all over the place. Soon, more than 2,000 formations were formed at the same time, and they were connected into an organic whole in midair like modular products. More than 2,000 formations were nested together, and the final formation that was formed was terrifyingly powerful. More than 1,000 oracles from Thousand Spirit Palace were trapped in the formation. Countless lightning bolts, thunderbolts, golden sabers, and streams of water were smashing down from all directions, while poisonous smoke, evil energy, ghost heads, and fiend deities were flying all over the place. Howling miserably, the oracles of Thousand Spirit Palace were dragged into the formation, and in just a blink of an eye, more than 800 oracles were severely wounded and fell to the ground. It was obvious that the people from Yen Tian Palace did not go too far. At least, they did not kill them. However, some of the oracles from Thousand Spirit Palace were charred by the thunderbolts, and at least half of their bodies were cooked. So, it could not be said that the people from Yen Tian Palace were merciful. Just as the dozen elders of Thousand Spirit Palace were about to be engulfed by the formation, a furious roar echoed out of the secret palace. Enough! Are you done yet? Chapter 727. A skinny old man in ragged clothes, who looked as if he had just been bombarded by thunderbolts hundreds of times, rushed out of the crowd in a threatening manner. Waving his hands and legs, he growled at Yu Chen, "You Lao San, are you going to use the formation of Yan Tian Palace against your own people?" Yu Chen's eyes went wide as he roared, "Who is on the same side as these people from Thousand Spirit Palace?" The Wuchang brothers, who were pinned under Wu Qi's feet and could not move, also roared, "We're not on the same side as them." The skinny old man rubbed his brows, feeling a headache coming on. Gnashing his teeth, he growled, "If it weren't for the human emperor's edict, and if you didn't force Lao Tzu, I would never be the grand elder of the secret palace." All day long, 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 are you done? Yu Chen leaped hundreds of feet into the air, pointed at the Wuchang brothers, and bellowed, "They are the ones who provoked Yan Tian Palace this time." Except for the unconscious Wuchang Qi, the three Wuchang brothers snapped, "Bullshit. Grand Elder Bai Huang, look at us. We're being stepped on by their people. What's so great about Yan Tian Palace? What's so great about having a high cultivation base? If you have what it takes, let us deploy the myriad spirits army formation and have a showdown with them." Bai Huang Mo, the great elder of Great Yu's secret palace, who was in charge of all the daily affairs of the secret palace, blinked his deep eyes that glowed with a faint blue light and muttered in a low voice, a little annoyed, "Decide the winner?" "Fine, Lao Tzu can't wait for all of you to die." Clenching his teeth, Bai Huang Mo pulled a long face and sighed in a low voice, all right, you're all old men. Although you're slightly younger than me, it's only a matter of 1,000 years. You're all elders in Yu's secret palace, but how old are your children and grandchildren? Why are you still doing these messy things all day long? He glanced at those elders of the Thousand Spirit Palace, who had their hands tucked into their sleeves and seemed to be fumbling with something. He snorted coldly and said, "If you dare to take out those things from your sleeves, Lao Tzu will break all your bones for the people of Yan Tian Palace." The elders of the Thousand Spirit Palace looked at each other and put their hands behind their backs. Naturally, they also extended their palms out of their sleeves. Bai Huang Mo glared at Yu Chen again and said with a cold snort, "Release him and dispel the formation, or Lao Tzu will help the Thousand Spirit Palace attack your Yan Tian Palace." "TSK, Lao Tzu has just mastered the Myriad Spirits Protection Grand Divine ability, and I'm eager to see if your Yan Tian Palace's formation can trap Lao Tzu." Yu Chen twitched his mouth, snorted, and glared at Bai Huang Mo as he said in a cold voice, "Of course this temporary formation can't do anything to you, Elder Bai Huang. If you have the guts, why don't you take a look at my Yan Tian Palace's defensive formation? If you have the guts, try breaking into my grand formation of vast heaven." While provoking Bai Huang Mo, Yu Chen clapped his hands, and the elders and oracles of Yan Tian Palace hurriedly retrieved all the energy stones, pearls, formation flags, and formation discs they had shot out, and undid the formation that enveloped the void. Bai Huang Mo was taken aback for a moment, then he growled at Yu Chen angrily, "Lao Tzu is a coward. Lao Tzu doesn't have the guts to break into the grand formation of vast heaven. Old third you've got guts. I've just concocted 1,000 fruit dragon saliva soup, try drinking it if you dare." With a flip of his palm, a small pot carved from black jade, about the size of a wash basin, appeared in Bai Huang Mo's hand. Tiny bubbles the size of mung beans kept rising from the depths of the dark potion, while a suffocating stench spread out rapidly. Even Wu Qi, who had transformed into a dragon man, staggered a few steps back. The stench was simply too horrible. Sounds of vomiting could be heard everywhere. Some oracles, who did not have a strong cultivation base and could not dodge in time, began to throw up. Only heaven knew what was mixed in Bai Huang Mu's dragon saliva and 1,000 fruits soup. The stench was so horrible that it made some oracles spit out their bile in just a few moments. Some oracles vomited so hard that yellow-green bile gushed out of their nostrils. They clutched their necks in pain, and their spasming fingers nearly broke their necks. Yu Chen's face turned extremely unsightly. He fixed his eyes on the soup in Bai Huang Mo's hand, then turned his head away and said, "For so many years, no one has ever broken into the grand array of vast heaven of Yen Tian Palace." Bai Huang Mo proudly showed off the little pot to the crowd. Then, he narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "All the decoctions Lao Tzu concocted are from the ancient secret recipes." He. After being carefully modified by Lao Tzu, those who have drunk Lao Tzu's decoctions have all turned into dead ghosts. It's quite powerful. He took a deep breath complacently and said, "Lao Tzu's goal with this dragon saliva thousand fruits soup is to poison a primordial immortal to death. Those gold immortals do not deserve to taste Lao Tzu's craftsmanship with such a superb decoction." Wu Qi stared blankly at Bai Huang Mo and wondered, which primordial immortal would drink your decoction? Perhaps the dragon saliva thousand fruits soup is very poisonous, but its smell is too horrible. I can smell it from hundreds of miles away. Which primordial immortal would drink your decoction? However, after Bai Huang Mo's interruption, the oracles of Yen Tian Palace and Thousand Spirit Palace had separated. The oracles of Yen Tian Palace were standing lazily behind Yu Chen, while the oracles of Thousand Spirit Palace were busy trying to save their companions. A few elders of Thousand Spirit Palace rushed to the severely wounded Wuchang brothers and hurriedly took out pills and fed them to them. At the same time, they set their bones, and bandaged their wounds with medicinal powder. However, as one of Wu Changqi's arms was bitten off by Ao Buzan, they could not save him in a short period of time. Therefore, the elders could only bandage his wounds first, then wake him up with some incense, which was similar to mugwort. The dizzy Wu Changqi opened his eyes and saw Bai Huang Mo, who was swaggering around with a small pot made of black jade in his hand. Wu Changqi immediately let out a miserable howl at the top of his voice. "You must uphold justice for me, Grand Elder. Yen Tian Palace has gone too far. This brat is simply lawless. You must punish them severely and kill this brat. Also, you must bring the dragon and 2 pythons to our Thousand Spirit Palace." Yu Chen jumped to his feet and roared, "I'd like to see who in you dares to touch even a hair on Tan Lang's head. He is a member of Yen Tian Palace. Wu Changqi, if you touch him, you will be attacking Yen Tian Palace as well. Elders, set up the mysterious heaven-devouring formation and kill these scourges of the Thousand Spirit Palace. Bai Huang Mo, if you dare to help them, Yu Chen, will never forgive you. Back then, you were too old to cultivate, seducing." Bai Huang Mo threw his head back and let out a furious roar. The deafening rumble shook all the oracles present and caused them to fall to the ground. Even Wu Qi felt a sharp pain in his eardrums. His eyes were filled with stars as he fell to the ground, unable to come to his senses for a long time to understand what was going on. His roar shocked all the oracles present. Then, Bai Huang Mo waved his sleeve triumphantly. The pattern of 8 dark supreme towers on his sleeve was so dazzling and eye-catching. Holding his head high, he snorted coldly and said, "Lao Tzu already knows the cause and effect of the incident. It is clearly Thousand Spirit Palace's fault this time. Wu Changqi, if you dare to say another word, Lao Tzu will strangle you right now." He glared fiercely at the masters and elders of Thousand Spirit Palace, then said with a cold grin, "Thousand Spirit Palace is the one who is at fault. What materials are you trying to capture? If you have the guts, go to the Celestial Court and rob them. Why do you have to touch the belongings of Yen Tian Palace's disciples? That is what you should not have done." All right, Thousand Spirit Palace will pay a little compensation to Tan Lang, and this matter will be over. The dark clouds in the sky will disperse just like that. Ha, we are all from the secret palace, and we are all family. Wu Changqi trembled with rage. He glanced at the hundreds of oracles behind him, who were badly wounded and had no idea whether they were dead or alive, then at Bai Huang Mo, whose eyes were gleaming with an eerie blue light and whose face was filled with the expression of violence and threat. Recalling some of the great achievements Bai Huang Mo had made, Wu Changqi gritted his teeth and swallowed his anger. Glancing greedily at Ao Buzan, who was coiled around Wu Qi's neck, and then at the dragon python sisters, who were lying on Wuqi's shoulder. Wu Changqi gritted his teeth and muttered, "Fine, I'll admit that I'm wrong this time. But as for whether it is really Thousand Spirit Palace's fault, we'll have to wait until our Grand Elder comes out of seclusion. But, it is true that we are wrong today, but that doesn't mean we will be wrong in the future. At least, we are wrong today." Licking his lips with his scarlet tongue, Wu Changqi snorted coldly and said, "Well, your name is Tan Lang, isn't it? What compensation do you want? I'm warning you." Before Wu Changqi could finish, Yuchen jumped to his feet again and said, "Who are you warning, Wu Changqi? Do you have no respect for Grand Elder Bai Huang?" Bai Huang Mo snorted coldly and gave Wu Changqi a displeased glare. Wu Changqi rolled his eyes, then said through clenched teeth, "This is the record of all the treasures in Thousand Spirit Palace's storehouse." With a flip of his palm, he produced a piece of dragon vertebra with a strange shape and threw it to Wu Qi. As soon as Wu Qi sent his divine sense into the dark vertebra, a massive amount of data immediately rushed into his divine soul. All the information about the countless treasures in Thousand Spirit Palace's storehouse instantly poured into Wu Qi's divine soul. The amount of data was so huge that it exploded in Wu Qi's divine soul without any buffering. If it were not for the fact that Wu Qi now possessed a very strong divine soul, his divine soul might have been damaged and turned into an idiot. Holding the vertebra tightly in his hand, Wu Qi gave Wu Changqi a cold look and said in a deep voice, "All right, I'm not greedy. There are 100 divine beasts' bloodlines here. Please give them to me, Master Wu Chang, and I'll let bygones be bygones." Wu Qi's heart pounded violently once again. After fusing the bloodlines of 100 divine beasts with himself, Wu Qi would have the transformation of 100 divine beasts. How could the legendary Heavenly Dipper and Earthly Fiend transformation compare with Wu Qi's miraculous transformation of bloodlines? Today, when the Thousand Spirit Palace was coveting Ao Buzan and the Dragon Python sisters, they had suffered a great loss. 4 of their masters were trampled to the ground and humiliated by Wu Qi, and hundreds of their disciples were severely wounded by Yen Tian Palace's formation. No matter how one looked at it, Wu Qi had the upper hand. Therefore, Wu Qi only wanted the bloodlines of 100 divine beasts. Being too greedy would leave a bad impression on others. As for the countless treasures recorded in the vertebra, based on the fact that Wu Changqi had plotted against Wu Qi just now, Wu Qi would definitely find an opportunity to take them all away. Wu Qi swore that he would take away all the materials from the bodies of countless divine beasts and fowls in Thousand Spirit Palace. Beside him, Bai Huang Mo burst into laughter and said, "Look, isn't this great? The dark clouds in the sky have dispersed, and we are still one family." Bai Huang Mo burst into laughter, and Yu Chen was grinning from ear to ear. But how could those people from Thousand Spirit Palace still laugh? They stared fixedly at Wu Qi, remembering his face when he appeared in the name of Tan Lang. Chapter 728. The courtyard was filled with ancient trees that towered into the sky. Behind a courtyard that occupied an area of more than 10,000 acres in Liangzhu, there was a small island surrounded by a lake. Amidst the lush greenery, a stone pagoda about 1,000 feet tall stood slanted up into the sky. The top floor of the pagoda was open, with a few stone hassocks placed inside, each with a small stone table placed in front of it. At the center of the pagoda was a small stove that was spewing red flames. Inside a bronze kettle was a pot of cold spring water extracted from an underground cold spring, slowly emitting a faint white mist. The cold spring water extracted from the depths of Liangzhu was extremely cold and heavy, yet it was extremely sweet and mellow, making it an excellent quality for making tea. However, the water was too cold. Although it had been agilely boiled for nearly an hour using a fire element energy stone in the stove, it still could not boil. 2 maidservants clad in long black dresses with delicate features were kneeling beside the stove, carefully tending to the fire and checking on the cold spring water in the kettle from time to time. A few excellent tea bricks were placed beside them. The green tea bricks were giving off a sweet fragrance that could calm one's mind and make one feel as if they were walking on clouds. Gao was sitting cross-legged on one of the hassocks, his eyelids drooping as if he was meditating. He placed his hands in front of his knees and held his breath. He slowly inhaled and exhaled, and each breath lasted for a quarter of an hour. He had been sitting like this for a long time, so long that he seemed to have become a part of the stone pagoda, becoming one with it. Next to him were 3 middle-aged men who looked similar to him, but their expressions were even duller and duller. They were also sitting neatly on the praying mats, breathing in and out deeply, as if they were wooden sculptures made of clay, without the slightest bit of vitality. Occasionally, their eyes would meet as if they were exchanging some opinions, but most of their attention was on Gao. The 3 middle-aged men were clad in black brocade robes that glinted faintly with a jade gleam. Their robes looked inconspicuous, but they were actually made of the finest silk, mixed with extremely rare threads extracted from nephrite using a secret technique. Such a material had a defensive strength no weaker than an ordinary heaven immortal artifact. On top of that, these robes were made by master craftsmen of Dayu using a secret technique, and were densely covered with countless runes and restrictive spells. Each of these robes cost tens of thousands of gold coins and had a very strong defensive strength. In Dayu, those who could wear such robes must be the princes of Dayu's imperial clan. In comparison, Gao's coarse black linen clothes, which never changed at all seasons, looked a little shabby. However, Gao's aura was several times stronger than the 3 middle-aged men. Even though he was wearing a sackcloth and sitting beside them, he still appeared to have a higher status than them. It was as if the 3 men were his attendants. 4 men and 2 maidservants sat silently on the stone pagoda, and the wind blowing over the lake brought the aroma of flowers and grass to them. Liangzhu was rich in natural energy, so the flowers and grass here grew very well. If not for the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials erasing their sentience, countless demons would have been born among these flowers and grass. Even so, the aroma of the flowers and grass here was as refreshing as spirit pills and miraculous medicines, and had a powerful effect of thoroughly cleansing one's internal organs. If one stayed here for a long time, it would have the effect of prolonging one's life. A gust of wind blew and swirled around the pagoda, and suddenly, a man appeared on the last empty hassock in the pagoda. Gao and the other 3 men bowed at the same time and said in a deep voice, "Father." The 2 maidservants hurriedly threw themselves to the ground and bowed, "Your Highness." King Yangshan, Ji Kuei, the father of Gao and the other 3 men, snorted softly and waved his hand slightly. The 2 maidservants straightened up obediently and began to serve the stove and the kettle even more carefully, not daring to make a single sound. Gao and his 3 brothers also straightened up and looked at Ji Kuei with their heads held high. Ji Kuei, who was nearly 10 feet tall, looked a bit scrawny. His face was covered by a layer of purple mist, which looked like a veil covering half of his scrawny face, making it hard for anyone to see his face through the purple mist. In the imperial court of Great Yu, Gao was known for being the most unpredictable. Very few people could figure out what he was thinking and what he wanted to do. Sitting cross-legged on the hassock, Ji Kuei cleared his throat and said slowly, "Gao, you've done a good job this time. I never thought you could really kill that old demon Taoist." When the 5 of us mobilized an army of 1,000,000 soldiers, and I even begged the few seniors to set up an ambush, we only managed to seriously injure him. I never thought you could really kill him. Gao bowed slightly and said in a deep voice, "I was just lucky to meet a talented man like Tan Lang." Before Ji Kuei could say anything, Ji Dai, King Qing Qiu, who was also Gao's eldest brother, said in a deep voice, that Tan Lang cultivates both fleshly body and magic, making him a rare talent. Especially since he has been rewarded by His Majesty, he will surely gain a lot from this trip to Yantian Palace. Royal Father, this child's subordinates are lacking in manpower. Since Master Yu has already been sent by Royal Father to help third brother, why don't you transfer this Tan Lang to work under this child? Ji Dai, who had thin lips and looked a little cold and ruthless, looked at Gao with a smile and said, "Third brother, you've been promoted to a king, and you're now King Yufeng, which makes you much better than us good-for-nothing brothers. Surely you won't miss a mere Tan Lang, will you?" "A mere Tan Lang?" Gao arched his brows and sneered, "A mere Tan Lang? Do you know how much effort I've put into recruiting Tan Lang? Do you know that in addition to the territories His Majesty has given him in East Sea Province, Tan Lang's original East Sea Province already has several provinces under his name? Do you know how much Gao owes Bo Zhongfu to befriend Tan Lang in order to get so much land from Bo Zhongfu's Zhong Province? Before Wu Qi was conferred the title of Marquis of East Sea Province, Gao, who was still King Yangqiu, had helped Wu Qi expand the territory of East Sea County several times in order to win him over. However, Donghai County was under the jurisdiction of Hai Province, and the few nearby provinces were all lower-grade provinces under the jurisdiction of Zhong Province. In order to get enough land from these provinces for Wu Qi, Gao had reached many agreements with Bo Zhongfu. In order to win over Wu Qi, Gao had spent a great deal of effort and paid a great price. Now that Ji Dai wanted to take Wu Qi away, how could Gao possibly agree? With a cold snort, Gao said in a flat tone, "If you feel that you don't have enough subordinates, you can take Yu Qingqing if you like him. But, if anyone dares to touch Tan Lang, don't blame me for not respecting our brotherhood." Sitting on a hassock, Ji Kuei did not seem to hear the argument between his eldest and third sons. He sat there like a stone statue, not responding to Gao and Ji Dai's words. It was only when Gao mentioned Yu Qingqing in an extremely disgusted tone that Ji Kuei narrowed his eyes slightly, a cold gleam flickering in them, as if he had thought of something. Ji Dai gave Gao a sideways glance and said with a cold grin, "Oh, does third brother think so highly of Tan Lang? Although he has the aptitude for cultivating both fleshly body and magic, it doesn't mean that he will be able to go on smoothly. If something were to happen to him, wouldn't the things that third brother gave him be wasted?" Ji Dai's words were filled with blatant threats. Gao snorted coldly and unleashed a chilling aura around him. "If anything happens to Tan Lang, the 9 divine generals under Big Brother's command will definitely meet their end," he said, glaring at Ji Dai. Ji Dai's face turned livid as he gave Gao a fierce glare and sneered. Gao's second brother, Ji Yu, and his fourth brother, Ji Lan, exchanged a glance. Ji Yu, who was so burly that one could not help but suspect that he had the blood of the Longbow Kingdom, said in a deep voice, "Third brother, you've made a great contribution and have been conferred the title of King Yufeng, but I'm still King Qiu. Lend me that Tan Lang for a while, and when I..." Without waiting for Ji Yu to finish, Gao turned him down and said, "Second brother, there's no need to talk about this anymore. If you do, it will hurt our brotherhood." Right after Gao refused Ji Yu, King Dongqiu, who had a pair of wings growing out of his back and was clearly the son of King Yangshan and a feather woman, blinked his eyes, then cupped his fist at Gao and said with a smile, "Third brother, both of my brothers have a strong army, but I..." With a wave of his hand, Gao sneered at Ji Lan and said, "Fourth brother, just give it up. Do you think I have such a good relationship with you? Who was the one who took the girl I liked by force when I was away with my army? Who was the one who slandered me in front of my father and almost made him order me to be flogged 10,000 times? Lend you Tan Lang? Do you think you're worth my time?" Ji Lan smiled faintly, but the color of his face did not change at all. In front of King Yangshan, Ji Kuei, Gao, and his 3 brothers had put on a good show of brotherly love. But Ji Kuei did not seem to hear what his 4 sons had said. He cleared his throat and waved his hand. Immediately, the 4 brothers shut their mouths, bowed their heads, and stopped moving. Ji Kuei glanced at his 4 sons and said coldly, "Don't even think about touching third brother. It's his luck that he was able to recruit Tan Lang. Pangu continent is a vast place, filled with countless extraordinary people and strange things. I wonder how many talents are hiding in the wilderness. Why don't you find them yourself?" With a cold snort, Ji Kuei said in a flat tone, "King Baishan and his sons have been playing tricks lately. The internal strife between you brothers is a trivial matter, but the fight between King Baishan and King Zhangqiu, those 2 rascals, is a matter of life and death. You have to figure out the key to it." Ji Kuei gave Gao a look and said in a deep voice, "Since Yu Qingqing is not on good terms with you, let him assist eldest brother. His Majesty has given you so many fiefs for your meritorious service. Are you short of men to manage them? Gao bowed and said in a deep voice, I have many soldiers under my command, but very few people to manage government affairs. Ji Kuei nodded slowly, then clapped his hands and said indifferently, well, let Feng Lingling help you. After all, he used to be the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, and he is more than enough to help you manage your fiefs. But, he is carrying a heavy responsibility, so don't let those people find out about him. With a gust of wind, Feng Lingling, the former prefecture overseer of Zhong province, appeared silently in the stone pagoda. Overjoyed, Gao burst out laughing, while the faces of Ji Dai, Ji Yu, and Ji Lan turned extremely unsightly. Chapter 729. 100 beams of blood-colored light were twisting in front of Wuqi like agile snakes. They were colorful, ranging from red, orange, yellow, green, and many other colors. The thinnest of these beams was several times thinner than a hair, and the thickest was as thick as a bucket, the shortest was only about 3 feet long, and the longest was about 1,000 feet long. Each beam was emanating a powerful and mysterious blood energy fluctuation, and they were pulsating like a heart. A faint mist swirled around them, and from time to time, the shadows of some giant beasts and birds of prey could be seen flashing in it. There were shadows of azure dragons, white tigers, black tortoises, blue wands, phoenixes, bifang, and all sorts of ancient divine beasts and fowls. These were the bloodlines of the 100 divine beasts and fowls that Wuqi extorted from Thousand Spirit Palace. As long as he fused with these bloodlines, he would be able to transform into any of them at any time, possess their innate divine abilities, and master the various mystic arts inherited in their bloodlines. Whether it was immortals or mortals in Diyu, they all admitted that divine beasts and fowls were created by the heaven and earth, and that each of them corresponded to a certain great Tao and law of heaven and earth. Therefore, many things that immortals and humans could not do could be easily done by these divine beasts and fowls. For example, if a gold immortal tried to dive into a bottomless abyss that was hundreds of thousands of miles deep, his immortal body would be crushed by the water pressure. But even a young azure dragon could enter such a deep abyss and walk freely without being harmed. It was also like the astral winds in the 9th heaven, which were filled with countless dangers, and some of them were so dangerous that even primordial immortals had to be careful. But Gales, who had just been born from the eggshell, could travel freely in the astral winds, just like mortals walking on the ground. This was their instinct, their innate divine ability. The bloodlines of the 100 divine beasts and fowls that Thousand Spirit Palace compensated Wuqi were extremely pure. They were the experimental materials extracted by Thousand Spirit Palace's oracles when they slaughtered those divine beasts and fowls with ancient bloodlines for experiments. With these 100 bloodlines, Wuqi could transform into 100 divine beasts and fowls, and he could easily go to some places that ordinary people could not. Thinking back to some dangerous places recorded in the Scroll of Stealing, if Wuqi were to barge into those places with his current cultivation base of 5th-tier gold immortal, he would definitely die. But, with the power of these divine beasts and fowls, Wuqi could easily go to those places and take the treasures away. On top of that, there were also the treasure vaults of those almighty experts, whose restrictive spells could not escape the natural forces derived from the various great Daos. With the innate escape art and the incarnations of these divine beasts, it would be much easier for him to sneak into someone's mansion and rob them in the future. Using the 7 foundation elevating technique to control chaotic energy, refine the bloodline, and transform into divine beasts and birds was a supreme mystic art found in Scroll of Stealing. The shadowy figure who taught Wuqi the Scroll of Stealing possessed the bloodline of over 3,700 divine beasts and birds. Compared to him, Wuqi was still far inferior. Looking at the twisted faces of the oracles of Thousand Spirit Palace in front of him, Wuqi smiled, then waved his hand and put the 100 bloodlines into his sleeve. He had already offended these oracles today, and these 100 bloodlines of divine beasts and fowls were more than enough. There were more than 2,000 bloodlines of various divine beasts in the secret vault of Thousand Spirit Palace, and he would find a chance to visit them in the future. Cupping his fist and bowing to Wu Changqi, whose face was livid, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Today's matter is over. If the Thousand Spirit Palace continues to pester me." Standing next to him, Bai Huang Mo waved his hand and said, "If they continue to pester you, Yan Tian Palace will fight them to the death. Lao Tzu will not interfere in this matter." His secret dealings in the past had almost been exposed by Yu Chen. Bai Huang Mo flung his sleeves a little resentfully, carried his stinking pot of medicine soup, and walked into the secret palace with his head held high. As soon as he entered the secret palace, Bai Huang Mo suddenly slapped himself on the head, turned around, and said with a cold grin, "Look at how badly the gate of the secret palace has been damaged. Won't it be a disgrace to the secret palace if word gets out? Wu Changqi, you're the one who caused this, so you have to fix the gate." Wu Changqi and his three brothers exchanged a glance, snorted coldly at the same time, then gritted their teeth and agreed to the task. Just now, the Dragon Python sisters had unleashed their divine light of ice and fire all over the sky, causing a 100-miles-long section of the cliff in front of the secret palace to collapse. The statues on the cliff were smashed to pieces, and the entire cliff was covered in melting magma. There were even large icebergs hanging on the cliff. With ice and fire coexisting with each other, it was a very ugly and messy scene. It was not an easy task to make the facade of the secret palace as magnificent and solemn as it used to be. But, Wu Changqi was being suppressed by someone else. Those powerful elders of the Thousand Spirit Palace were in a secluded cultivation, so Wu Changqi, who lacked a strong backer, could only swallow his pride. Seeing Wu Changqi's expression, Yu Qin could not help but laugh in a strange voice. He took a few steps in front of the people of the Thousand Spirit Palace, then laughed and said, "Please go back, elders. Ha, if anyone dares to provoke the people of Yan Tian Palace, don't blame me for getting angry and placing the grand array of great heaven in front of their ancestral mansion." Ha! The elders and oracles of Yan Tian Palace were laughing arrogantly and wildly. Today, the people of Yan Tian Palace had set up a formation and severely wounded hundreds of oracles of the Thousand Spirit Palace, which made them feel very proud. It was always like this in the branch palaces of the secret palace. A little dispute could easily lead to a big conflict. Of course, such conflicts rarely resulted in deaths, and usually, the dignity of a branch palace was completely trampled on. Today, the Yan Tian Palace had severely humiliated the Thousand Spirit Palace. It was a very good feeling. One after another, the oracles of Yan Tian Palace and Thousand Spirit Palace returned to their respective palaces. Those who were studying the formation went back to studying it, and those who were healing the wounded and dying went back to treating their injured colleagues. The Wuchang brothers, who had been brutally beaten and humiliated, had to pay for the bloodlines of 100 divine beasts and fowls, began to figure out how to regain their dignity. But, it had nothing to do with Wu Qi. As the first master of Yan Tian Palace, Yu Chen personally saw Wu Qi out of the secret palace. As the two of them walked in the windy valley, Yu Chen carefully introduced the various branches of the secret palace to Wu Qi, as well as the complicated relationships between them. Through Yu Chen's narration, Wu Qi gained a deeper understanding of the secret palace. The so-called secret palace was an amalgamation of the smartest and most talented geniuses in Diyu. They studied all kinds of profound knowledge in the secret palace, and the things they studied covered almost everything in the world. But, because the secret palace was made up of a group of geniuses, each of them was proud and arrogant, and refused to submit to anyone they met. Therefore, there were many disputes between the various branches of the secret palace. Each branch palace thought that the things they studied were the great Tao of the world, while the other branches studied crooked and wicked things. Therefore, every branch palace would have a small-scale, high-intensity conflict every few days. However, it was rare for anyone to lose their lives. Today's conflict with the Thousand Spirit Palace only involved a little over 2,000 people. It was not a big scene at all. Just half a year ago, a conflict broke out between the Thousand Spirit Palace and the Divine Gu Palace, which specialized in the study of all kinds of witchcraft poisons, because two disciples fell in love and broke up with each other. The two branches sent out tens of thousands of oracles to fight each other with all kinds of mystic arts. During the 3-month-long conflict, zombies and poisonous creatures were crawling all over the secret palace, and all kinds of strange and unheard-of venomous things rolled and crawled all over the place. In the end, all the branches of the secret palace were involved. By the time all the elders of the secret palace's elder council came out to suppress the conflict, 150,000 oracles of the secret palace had been bedridden. The elders of the secret palace's elder council flew into a rage and locked all the elders of the Thousand Spirit Palace and Divine Gu Palace in a secret cave at the back of the mountain for half a year to reflect on their mistakes. This was the reason why Wu Changqi and the others said that their elders were in secluded cultivation. 150,000 oracles are bedridden. Wu Qi looked at Yu Chen in amazement. The old man's face was beaming with excitement, and he was dancing with joy, as if he was still excited about the fact that Yan Tian Palace had secretly deployed the Little Red Sun 9 Dragons Fiend Refining Formation a few months ago and burned more than 24,000 oracles of the Thousand Spirit Palace, Divine Gu Palace, and 3 other branches. Do you know why Wu Changqi was so submissive when he saw me attacking him today? Yu Chen proudly said, 4 months ago, this old master and my people laid out the Crimson Sun 9 Dragons Minor Fiend Refining Formation, burning tens of thousands of their disciples and forcing them to flee like rats. Before they regain their face, who dares to be presumptuous in front of this old master? Yu Chen snorted coldly, looked at Wu Qi, smiled, and said, Tan Lang, you are a genius who cultivates both magic and fleshly body, so I really want you to join Yan Tian Palace. With you as our capable general, Yan Tian Palace will be able to suppress them. Wu Qi laughed dryly. He suddenly felt that it was a wise decision for him to refuse to join Yan Tian Palace. He did not think his latent talent was very good, but he was lucky enough to find a heaven-defying treasure like the Scroll of Stealing. A place like De Yu's secret palace, where geniuses and lunatics gathered in droves, was really not suitable for him. Yu Chen could see the reluctance on Wu Qi's face. He sighed softly, patted Wu Qi's shoulder, and murmured in a low voice, she's my youngest daughter. You'd better think it through. As long as you marry my daughter, Yu Mu and the others will have to address you as patriarch when they see you. With that, your seniority will rise instantly. Wu Qi laughed dryly, his face twitching. He dared not to answer Yu Chen's question. Yu Chen shook his head helplessly. A dozen white-robed oracles were waiting quietly in the clearing in front of them, and 2 old men in black robes were standing off to the side, looking in their direction. Yu Chen blinked his eyes, lowered his voice, and said to Wu Qi, those 2 little fellows are the supervisors of the treasury of the Directorate of Celestials. His Majesty has ordered you to pick a supreme tower from the Directorate of Celestials as a reward, right? Wu Qi nodded. Emperor Haozuan had indeed given him this extra reward. Yu Chen gave the 2 old men a quick glance, then came close to Wu Qi's ear and said with a smile, there is a hidden treasury in the depths of the treasury. The way to open it is as follows. Choose those supreme towers that are the most dusty and hidden in the most inconspicuous corners. The older they look, the better. Especially those that look like they are missing a corner. You must not let them go. Wu Qi gave Yu Chen a look of horror, but Yu Chen just laughed, flicked his sleeve, and spun into the valley. While Wu Qi was pondering over Yu Chen's words, the 2 old men in black spoke dryly. Marquis of East Sea Province, follow us to the treasury of the Directorate of Celestials to pick a supreme tower that His Majesty has bestowed upon you. Chapter 730. Through the teleportation formation constructed by the white-robed oracles, Wu Qi and the 2 chief supervisors were teleported to a group of magnificent palaces. In the center was a square that measured about 10 miles in both width and length, surrounded by square, pitch-black palaces. In front of each of these palaces stood a number of huge stone pillars, and the green light emitted from them made one look like a ghost. A gust of wind passed through the cracks in the palaces and swept across the square. The moaning of the wind sounded like the sigh of a wild ghost, bringing with it a desolate air. The palaces and the square were extremely old, and every boulder, every stone pillar, and every flagstone on the ground had the unique marks of time. All the palaces were lying on the ground like ancient beasts, exuding a ferocious and mysterious aura that made one's heart palpitate amidst the gloomy air. Many oracles in black robes were walking in and out of the palaces. All of them were moving slowly and unhurriedly, just like how the entire Great Yu gave off the feeling of the entire dynasty. Everyone had a straight face, and when they walked, their eyes were fixed on a certain spot on the floor in front of them, making them look a little dull and lifeless. But, just by looking at the patterns of golden suns and silver moons on the sleeves of these oracles, one could tell that these oracles, who looked like wooden men, actually possessed an extremely strong overall strength. They were dull and lifeless, like the walking dead, but contained a power that could destroy everything in their bodies. This was not only the impression these oracles gave people, but also the impression of the entire dynasty of Yu. Wu Qi did not have the time to study the surrounding scenery, as two black-robed old men held him from both sides and brought him to a palace in the distance. In just a few steps, the two old men had used some kind of magic that could shrink the ground into inches to bring Wu Qi to the front of the palace. This palace was the same as countless other palaces near and far. It was square-shaped and built with black boulders. Countless complicated runes were carved on the surface of the stones, which were polished to a mirror-like surface, and inlaid with black energy stones, forming a powerful defensive formation. On the roof of the palace stood some black-robed Heaven-Eye people and God-Ear people. They formed an impenetrable defense system to prevent outsiders from approaching this palace. In front of the hall, there was a gate that was about 10 feet wide and more than 100 feet tall. Stone steps paved with huge stones led to this gate in front of Wu Qi. The inside of the gate was dark, and the green light from the outside couldn't penetrate it. It gave people a feeling that this gate led directly to another world, a world that didn't belong to the living. This great hall was built on a stone platform that was hundreds of meters tall. In front of Wu Qi, there was a wide stone staircase that led straight to the front door of the great hall. On the stone staircase, hundreds of warriors wearing heavy armors and long black robes were standing. The exposed skin of these heavy armor warriors was densely covered with all kinds of colorful tattoos. These tattoos glowed faintly and flowed slowly like living creatures, forming a set of living diagrams. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. Is this the unique formation of Yu's Directorate of Celestials? Using a special potion and a special technique to embroider all kinds of runes on a person's body, these formations would automatically absorb all kinds of natural energy and inject it into the body, strengthening the muscles and bones according to the design of the formation. Coupled with the help of all kinds of special potions, the warriors with these formations could quickly gain a powerful fighting strength without the need of cultivation. This was a mystic art that Yu's Directorate of Celestials excelled in, quickly producing powerful warriors in large quantities. It was said that in the ancient times, the immortals of the celestial court had several fierce conflicts with Yu. On several occasions, the immortals who almost won were thrown into confusion by the fearless runes warriors quickly produced by the Directorate of Celestials. In the end, both immortals and Yu suffered heavy losses, and no one gained any advantage. The most frightening thing was that when the warriors possessed by the runes warriors died, their souls would be imprisoned in their fleshly bodies, never to be reincarnated. Their fleshly bodies would transform into a forbidden existence that was half zombie and half ghost, possessing an overall strength that was 100 times stronger than when they were alive. It was because of this characteristic that the art of runes warriors was also a forbidden art in Yu. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the Directorate of Celestials would not dare to produce a large number of them. The warriors in front of him did not have the slightest aura of a living person, and there were only 2 balls of dim green flames leaping in their eye sockets. They were not living people, but dead spirits whose souls were imprisoned in their bodies. Wu Qi carefully sensed their strength with his divine will, and found that they were very strong, indescribably strong. These warriors possessed an aura of death that was completely opposite to life. If one was hit by them, it would not be a pleasant experience, but a fatal one. These warriors looked at Wu Qi with gloomy eyes. Being held hostage by 2 black-clothed old men, Wu Qi walked up the stone steps step by step and entered the great hall through the pitch-black door. As soon as he stepped through the door, a gust of cold air blew at his face, bringing with it an indescribable odor. It made Wuqi's nose itch and made him sneeze a few times. Amidst Wuqi's sneezes, a faint phosphorescent light lit up the dark great hall. One of the black-clothed old men said in a deep voice, "According to His Majesty's decree, Marquis of East Sea can pick any supreme tower here and take it away. He, a genius who cultivates both fleshly body and magic, should be given such preferential treatment. In the future, Marquis of East Sea is very likely to become a supreme expert." Another black-clothed old man pulled Wuqi's hand and led him to a corner of the great hall. "Today, Marquis of East Sea will owe me a favor. This is the best supreme tower in the Directorate of Celestials. If Marquis of East Sea achieves great success in the future, you just need to take care of our descendants." When the phosphorescent light shone, Wuqi had a clear look at the interior of the great hall. It was a space that measured hundreds of miles in both width and length, and was dozens of miles in height. Countless pitch-black supreme towers, large and small, were hovering in the air. The largest supreme tower was about a mile tall, while the smallest was only a few inches tall. But, regardless of their size, all the supreme towers had faint runes flashing on their surfaces, emanating powerful energy fluctuations. Every year, the Directorate of Celestials of Dayu would collect countless rare materials and forge a certain number of supreme towers. When a new supreme oracle was born in Dayu, he would come here and pick a supreme tower as his future place of cultivation and residence. At the same time, the supreme towers had the ability to break through the void, and were the daily means of transportation for supreme oracles. But, supreme oracles did not appear every year, and every year, the Directorate of Celestials of Dayu would produce a different number of supreme towers. Therefore, over the years, the number of supreme towers in this storehouse had been increasing. Based on what Wuqi could see, there were more than 100,000 supreme towers in this storehouse. These supreme towers were also the strategic ordnance of Dayu. If a conflict broke out between Dayu and a certain power, those sun oracles who were not qualified to own a supreme tower would come here to get a temporary supreme tower as a backup. The supreme tower was a powerful magical artifact with both offensive and defensive capabilities. Although only supreme oracles had enough power to really drive a supreme tower, as long as they were willing to spend immortal stones and energy stones, even sun oracles could drive a supreme tower to fight for a short period of time. A lower-grade supreme tower filled with enough immortal stones and energy stones was enough to give a sun oracle an offensive and defensive strength infinitely close to that of a 9th-tier primordial expert for a few days. Moreover, there were more than 100,000 supreme towers in this storehouse, and the energy core of each supreme tower was filled with immortal stones and energy stones. This showed how strong the resources of Dayu were. The black-clothed old man brought Wuqi to a corner of the hall, where dozens of fist-sized, pitch-black supreme towers hovered, emitting a faint silver gleam. The black-clothed old man looked at Wuqi and said with a smile, "These are the strongest supreme towers made in recent years. All the materials and runes are personally made by Yuchao Feng, the most brilliant craftsman in the Directorate of Celestials." Yuchao Feng was a member of Dayu's Yuchao clan. In Dayu, Yuchao clan was famous for the art of artifact crafting, and the best magical artifacts of Dayu were all made by them. Wuqi glanced at the dozens of fist-sized supreme towers in front of him with his divine sense. Sure enough, they were all excellent, flawless in both the appearance and the runes on the inside. But, just because they were flawless did not mean they were the best. Remembering what Yu Chen had told him just now, Wuqi gave the two black-clothed old men a look and said with a cunning smile, "Does His Majesty mean that I can choose any supreme tower in this hall at will?" The two black-clothed old men exchanged a glance, then nodded at the same time and said, "That's His Majesty's order." So of course, before the two old men could finish their words, Wuqi gave a loud laugh and spun around the grand hall like a gust of wind. Wisps of phosphorescent flames shot out of his fingertips, bringing with them an immense ghost aura, twisting and distorting the air. Each stream of ghastly ghost energy hid an invisible restrictive spell in the air. As Wuqi unleashed the last stream of ghastly ghost energy, a watery gleam suddenly flashed on the high wall to the north of the hall, and a door silently emerged. The two black-clothed old men were struck dumb. They exchanged a glance and cursed in a low voice at the same time. How could Master Yu Chen of Yan Tian Palace do this? Wu Qi laughed, winked at the two black-clothed old men playfully, and strode into the door. The two old men looked at each other with a worried expression, then hurriedly followed him in. They were mumbling something to the effect of, so and so has done us a favor, so it's hard for them to even out their account books and so on. The interior of the new door was not very spacious, only about a few acres in size. A dozen shelves carved from stones were scattered on the ground, and about 300 of them, each the size of a human head, were placed randomly on these stone shelves. The air here was very clean, almost spotless. However, the sky-split towers on the stone shelves were extremely dirty and dilapidated. On the shelf closest to Wu Qi, there was a supreme tower that was covered with an inch-thick layer of dust, and there were even some things that looked like spider webs on it. The inner hall was extremely clean, the ceiling, walls, and floor were all spotless, and the air was extremely fresh and clean. Even the stone shelves were so clean that they could be used as mirrors. Only these 300-plus Tong Tian towers were very dirty. Perhaps it was not dirty, but a kind of mark that time had left on them after a very long time. Each of these sky-reaching towers gave people the feeling that they had existed in this world for countless years. Chapter 731. Time. Holding his breath, Wu Qi walked cautiously to one of the supreme towers. He could feel the passage of time, which was 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, or even faster than the normal time. There were a few supreme towers among them, and he only stood there in a daze for a while. He sensed that dozens of periods had passed in the space around those supreme towers, which was about a foot in circumference around them. 10,000 years passed in an instant, 100,000 cycles in a snap of a finger, and countless generations of flowers bloomed and withered. The flow of time was so fast that the sky-split towers themselves couldn't withstand the crazy flow of time. Their bodies began to slowly disintegrate and collapse. Some of the materials that made up their bodies turned into dust and piled up on the sky-split towers. This was the reason why the supreme towers here were so shabby and dirty. Time passed by quickly. Just as Wu Qi was observing them, a tiny crack suddenly appeared on the base of one of the supreme towers. Accompanied by a crisp cracking sound, the dust on the supreme tower grew thicker. The two black-clothed old men exchanged a helpless glance. This was the inner treasury of the Directorate of Celestials, where the best supreme towers had been stored since ancient times. Only when a supreme oracle had attained the cultivation base of 6 towers or above would he be qualified to come here and choose a supreme tower that had the power to control the flow of time. Or, like Wu Qi, he came here because of the human emperor's decree. Of course, without anyone's guidance, those lucky fellows who obtained the decree might not even appear in tens of thousands of years. In short, without anyone's guidance, these lucky ones would never have entered the inner treasury of the inner treasury. Unless they were like Yu Chen, who shamelessly taught Wu Qi the way to enter the inner treasury, no outsider would ever know of its existence, let alone break into it. To use oracles had reached the limit of the use of space. A small palace could easily have a vast space of 1,000 miles in circumference, and a supreme tower that was no more than a mile tall might have a space of tens of thousands of miles in circumference, which could easily accommodate a large army. However, time was more mysterious than space, and it was even more difficult to control the power of laws. An ordinary supreme tower could distort the space at will, but only a supreme tower forged with extremely precious materials and the true flame of over 100 experts from the Directorate of Celestials with their blood essence could have the power to control the flow of time. The Directorate of Celestials had a large number of experts, and manpower was not the bottleneck in building a supreme tower like this. The biggest difficulty was the materials. Materials that could control time and could remain intact during the rapid passage of time were extremely rare. Only top-notch chaos-grade spiritual items could be found in such rare materials. These chaos-grade treasures had been collected by Dayu's team of experts who had ventured deep into the chaos-verse beyond the stars, risking their lives to collect them. Generally speaking, if Dayu gave it his all, and if he was lucky enough, he could forge a supreme tower that could control time in about 10 yuan hui. Any Babel tower that possessed the time arcana was a national treasure. How could it be easily obtained by others? But this time, Wu Qi had received Yu Chen's guidance, and Wu Qi was carrying Emperor Haozuan's decree. Since Emperor Haozuan had allowed Wu Qi to choose any supreme tower in the Directorate of Celestials, even if Wu Qi took away a supreme tower that could control time, it would still be his blessing. Wu Qi's eyes gleamed with excitement. A supreme tower that could control time. Indescribable, absolutely indescribable. Not to mention the benefits these treasures could bring to his cultivation base, just the few top-notch supreme towers here alone could make the time around them pass by in the blink of an eye in the outside world for dozens of yuan hui. If Wu Qi planted a batch of top-notch herbs in one of these supreme towers, and then waited outside for a day, no, he could not wait for a day. If he waited for a day, perhaps the supreme towers would already be full of demon immortals in the form of various spirit herbs. As long as he waited for a tenth of a second, he would be able to obtain countless powerful spirit herbs that were tens of thousands of years old. Or, if he threw a group of cultivators whose souls were under his control into the supreme towers, what kind of existences would they become when they reappeared? Heaven immortals should not come out and embarrass themselves, and gold immortals were just ordinary primordial immortals. That was not impossible. Of course, to control the passage of time, there would be a huge consumption, and a very high requirement for Wu Qi's cultivation base. But, with these supreme towers, there were infinite possibilities. Nodding and smiling at the two black-clad old men, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, the most dilapidated one. I'll take it. Not allowing the two old men to speak, Wu Qi pointed his finger out, and a stream of blood shot out, shooting toward the highest supreme tower on the stone shelf in the middle. It was only the size of a baby's fist, but it was dilapidated, and the passage of time had stirred the surrounding void into a chaotic mess. Wu Qi's blood essence slowly shot out. When it was 1 foot away from the supreme tower, a great amount of blood suddenly sprayed out from all the pores on his body, as a terrible suction force was madly sucking his blood essence. Damn it! Wu Qi's eyes went wide. How could a top-notch treasure require so much blood essence? With a loud cry, he exercised the dragon kill. Abruptly, Wu Qi's body grew taller. His blood and energy were tumbling inside him, and a powerful life force was surging rapidly in his meridians like a great river. A huge amount of blood essence kept flowing out of his bone marrow, turning into a torrential wave of blood that shot out of his body and rushed toward the supreme tower. The dust on the surface of the ancient and dilapidated supreme tower was slowly sucked into the tower, and the tower, which was full of potholes and cracks, was gradually repaired. A strange light flickered at the top of the tower, and the distorted space around it gradually returned to normal. As Wu Qi's blood essence kept being injected into the supreme tower, a faint layer of blood-red light gradually covered the surface of the tower, and a layer of fine, twisted, blood-red runes was gradually extending from the base to the top. One of the black-clothed old men cried out in alarm, "Be careful, Marquis of East Sea Province. This top-notch supreme tower requires a lot of blood essence, and no one except the Supreme Oracle can cope with its extraction." The faces of the two old men twisted with fear. They were well informed, and they knew that Wu Qi, who was rewarded by Emperor Haozuan, was the new trusted subordinate of King Yufeng, who was the son of King Yangshan, who was extremely powerful in the imperial court of Diyu. To put it bluntly, although they were the supervisors of the treasury under the Directorate of Celestials, if something happened to Wu Qi here, all Gao had to do was complain to King Yangshan, and both of them would be doomed eternally, and their families and clansmen would definitely be implicated. Never in their wildest dreams did they expect that Wu Qi would spill his blood essence on the supreme towers without asking them how to collect them. Their faces pale with fright, the two old men rushed to Wu Qi's side and hurriedly pulled out a poisonous dragon blood pill from under their sleeves. It was a pill that could replenish one's blood essence and energy essence, and could produce a large amount of blood essence in a short period of time without harming one's foundation. But, before they could feed the pill to Wu Qi, they heard Wu Qi let out a dragon roar, and a deafening rumble that sounded like the rising tide of a great river rang out from his body as his body abruptly grew tens of feet taller. A formidable aura burst out of Wu Qi's body in the form of a 9-nether ghost flame, which stood 1,000 feet tall. The two black-clothed old men were so frightened that they turned tail and fled. He opened his mouth and spat out a column of blood that was as thick as a water tank, smashing into the supreme tower that had begun to spin rapidly like a beam of blood. Good heavens! How did this guy cultivate? Why is his blood and energy even stronger than those lords? The two old men had been in charge of the treasury of the Directorate of Celestials for many years, and they had seen countless formidable oracles who came to collect the supreme towers. But, even among those supreme oracles they had met, only a few could compare with Wu Qi in terms of blood and energy essence. What they did not know was that the scroll of stealing that Wu Qi was cultivating was an expert in using external objects to nourish himself. Since he started cultivating, Wu Qi had devoured a lot of blood essence and energy essence, and everything he had done had made his foundation extremely strong and stable. So, the loss of this little bit of blood essence was nothing to him. All he needed to do was to convert the energy essence into blood essence through his internal organs, and then spray it out of his body. Apart from that, there was no other trouble. Blood-colored runes gradually covered the entire surface of the Supreme Tower, and gradually, Wu Qi sensed a faint spiritual connection connecting him with the Supreme Tower in front of him. After taking a deep breath and spraying a large amount of blood essence onto the Supreme Tower, Wu Qi produced the Dark Yin Celestial Tower and thrust it toward the Supreme Tower. The Dark Yin Celestial Tower was the magical treasure Wu Qi had refined with his own life, and it was guarded by the soul of the Great Ocean Water Divider. Therefore, it was full of spirituality. Although its power was far inferior to this Supreme Tower, in terms of spirituality, it was many realms lower than this Supreme Tower. A dazzling silvery light towered into the sky. Under the control of Wu Qi's divine sense, the two pagodas fused into one like two masses of liquid, and the countless restrictive spells in them quickly disintegrated and fused together. The time-restrictive spell in the Supreme Tower surrounded the 360 star pearls, and the flow of time around them immediately increased by 100 times. The flow of time was 100 times faster than normal, and that was the highest speed he could sustain with his current cultivation base. Through Wu Qi's divine sense, the Great Ocean Water Divider Hasek sent him a joyful message. The time-restrictive spell had brought great benefits to the entire pagoda. A series of light and shadow swayed in the void, followed by a great sheet of starlight falling from the sky and being quickly absorbed by the newly formed pagoda. The 360 star pearls extracted the star energy essence at 100 times the usual speed, transforming it into a vast amount of star power and storing it in the pearls. Meanwhile, a great amount of the purest star power essence was injected into Wu Qi's body bit by bit, gradually tempering his body and making both his fleshly body and divine soul stronger and tougher. The flow of time 100 times faster was immeasurable benefits. Gladly, Wu Qi summoned the pagoda back and spat another mouthful of blood essence onto it. After that, he shrunk his body and returned to his original size, cupped his fist and said to the two old men, "Thank you, seniors. If you trust me, just send your children and grandchildren to me, and I'll know how to take care of them." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and smiled. The reason why these two old men tried to befriend him just now was that they wanted him to take care of his children and grandchildren in the future. Since that was the case, he would take care of their children and grandchildren. Since they were able to become the chief supervisors of the Directorate of Celestials Treasury, it was obvious that they had some connections in the Directorate of Celestials. Taking care of their children and grandchildren was also a good way for him to build up his network. The two old men stared at Wu Qi in horror. Just as they were about to say something to Wu Qi, a series of footsteps suddenly came from outside the treasury. Quick, quick! What's going on? Why did the starlight break the restrictive spell and shine in? Put a curfew on the place. Don't let anyone out. While Wu Qi was stunned, a large group of black-robed oracles from the Directorate of Celestials had already rushed in. Chapter 732. The Grand Oracle of Dayu's Directorate of Celestials, by Huang Mu, was a dry man. Not only was he as dry as a reed stick, but his speech was also dry and tasteless. After asking the two black-clothed old men about the cause and effect of the matter, he said to Wu Qi in a flat tone, "I'll settle this with Yu Chen. Even if I owe him a favor, I can't play this kind of game." Wu Qi looked at Bai Huang Mu nervously and said in a deep voice, "This pagoda." Bai Huang Mu shook his head and said, "Since you've already taken it, this pagoda is naturally yours. Marquis of East Sea has His Majesty's decree, and it's your blessing to have this pagoda. It has nothing to do with you, so you don't have to think too much about it. Someone, send the Marquis of East Sea away." A few black-clothed oracles walked up slowly and motioned Wu Qi to leave the inner treasury. Wu Qi gave Bai Huang Mu a look, cupped his fist, and silently bowed to him, then followed the oracles out of Dayu's Directorate of Celestials. The matter was solved more easily than Wu Qi had imagined. When the two pagodas merged into one just now, the star pearl and the restrictive spell of time had undergone some wonderful changes. The sudden increase in gravity had allowed the high-altitude star force to break through the protective formation of the inner treasury and crash into it. This matter had even alarmed the Grand Oracle, Bai Huang Mu. The Bai Huang clan was the #1 clan in the branch of Dayu's Directorate of Celestials. About 10% of the supreme oracles in the history of Dayu were from the Bai Huang clan, which showed the clan's prestige and status in Dayu. As the current Grand Oracle of Directorate of Celestials and the immediate superior of all the Directorate of Celestials in Dayu, Bai Huang Mu's cultivation base had reached an unfathomable level. Wu Qi was afraid that he would be in trouble if he disturbed this mighty figure. But, he did not expect Bai Huang Mu to be so easy to talk to. After asking him a few questions, he let him leave the Directorate of Celestials smoothly. As for how he would explain it to Yu Chen, this matter had nothing to do with Wu Qi. Since Yu Chen dared to guide Wu Qi to obtain a treasure that could control time, it was clear that he was not afraid of Bai Huang Mu's wrath. The Directorate of Celestials was located on the east side of Liangzhu, between a long stretch of hills. Countless palaces could be seen dotting the mountains and valleys. Along the way, Wu Qi had memorized all the paths from the inner treasury to the periphery of the Directorate of Celestials. Along the way, he had passed by at least 1,000 palaces of varying sizes, each of which was frequented by numerous oracles. These were just the palaces they had passed on their way out of the inner treasury. There were still many more palaces hidden in the fog behind the mountain, and Wu Qi could not see them. The scale of the Directorate of Celestials in Liangzhu was simply astonishing. Led by a few black-robed oracles, Wu Qi left the Directorate of Celestials. After showing Wu Qi the way to Liangzhu and telling Wu Qi where to find Gao and the others, the black-robed oracles turned and left, ignoring Wu Qi. Wu Qi shook his head. He glanced around for a while and memorized the terrain around the Directorate of Celestials. Then, he glanced at the city wall dozens of miles ahead of him, then walked toward the city with resignation. Gao should be waiting for him in King Yangshan's mansion. King Yangshan held great power in the imperial court of Dayu, and was one of the most important ministers of Dayu. As long as Wu Qi entered the city, it would not be difficult for him to find out where his mansion was. Just a few miles out of the Directorate of Celestials, there was a great river about 100 miles wide, which curved into an arc at the edge of Liangzhu. Wu Qi walked along the river bank and arrived at the east gate of Liangzhu. Like the other great rivers in Yuxiong Plain, 70% of the water in this river was liquefied natural energy, and the remaining 30% was clear water. The river was not paved with sand, but gems the size of fists and jades the size of human heads. Just by casually tossing and turning in this river, one could find rare and precious treasures in the outside world. In the grass by the river, there were a few old fishermen in straw raincoats fishing with fishing rods in their hands. These fishermen had strong muscles and bones. Even though they didn't practice any cultivation methods, their physical strength was extremely shocking. Wu Qi scanned their bodies with his divine sense and found that their fleshly bodies were as strong as that of lower-grade heaven immortals, and the strength in their hands was enough to move a great mountain. Their fishing rods, fishing lines, and hooks were made with extremely simple craftsmanship. Obviously, they were made by themselves. But, the fishing rods were made of gold-spotted purple bamboo, the fishing lines were silk spun by 10,000-year-old snow silkworms, and the hooks were ground from star-patterned dark iron. If this set of luxurious fishing gear were to fall into the hands of an immortal, he could casually refine it with his natal true flame for a few days, and then infuse it with a strong item spirit, and it would become the material for a set of upper-grade heaven immortal artifacts. Wu Qi could not help but grin as he watched the few old fishermen pull out golden carps that were as long as a man from the river. These carps had long whiskers, golden scales, and blinking eyes that looked like the eyes of a dragon. Every time they blinked, a golden gleam would shoot out of their eyes. Clearly, they were all fish spirits that had grown up. Hovering over Wu Qi's head, Ao Buzan sighed faintly and said, "If they are given the right opportunity, they will become dragons. But why are they going to become the food on a plate after being caught by someone here?" Wu Qi shook his head and said nothing. He gave the few old fishermen a look, then walked toward Liangzhu, speechless. The natural energy in Yuxiong Plain was so strong that the mortals here were different from those in the outside world. These old fishermen had never cultivated, but their overall strength was no weaker than heaven immortals. Yuxiong Plain was 100 billion miles wide, and it had more than 1 trillion people. With just an order from Diyu, he could easily recruit a large army in 10 days with all kinds of cultivation techniques. Even though the immortals possessed strong cultivation bases and magical abilities, Great Yu had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. Perhaps this was the reason why Diyu could coexist with the Celestial Court, and why the Celestial Court could not invade Panga continent completely. A group of farmers, carrying hoes and plows on their backs, were walking along the river bank, laughing and joking. When they saw Wu Qi, they recognized that he was wearing a luxurious robe that only Marquis Diyu could wear. But, these simple and honest farmers only greeted Wu Qi from a distance, and did not kneel to greet Wu Qi. From these farmers, Wu Qi could sense a strong aura of nature and equality. Even though he was Marquis Diyu, these farmers only treated him as an ordinary man. It was a good feeling. Wu Qi smiled and cupped his fist at the farmers. These farmers were tall and strong, with strong muscles all over their bodies, a clear sign that they contained great strength. But, they did not practice any cultivation technique. Living in Yuxiong Plain, they were constantly nourished by the rich natural energy, so they were born with abundant blood energy and great physical strength. Compared with the mortals living outside Yuxiong Plain, they were undoubtedly much luckier. Living in a place rich in natural energy like this, their lifespan would be dozens of times longer than their peers outside. Ao Buzan smacked his lips and said with mixed emotions, "The patriarchs of Lao Tzu's clan once said that in the ancient times, those ancient people all had the divine power to move mountains and drain seas." At first, Lao Tzu did not believe it. Could these people, who could only be eaten as snacks, really have such a good fortune? Now, it seems that the patriarchs did not lie. I'm afraid that the ancestors of these people were really born with great divine power, which allowed them to survive from the ancient times to this day. Wu Qi nodded his head silently. Feeling at ease, he began to enjoy the scenery around him. Farmlands could be seen everywhere, and people were chatting with each other. Small fishing boats could be seen sailing across the great river. Occasionally, there were ferries by the river, and simple and beautiful village girls could be seen washing their clothes in the river. The rustic scenery was simple and pure, which made Wu Qi sigh. How could the so-called Xanadu compare with the scenery here in Liangzhu? Immersed in the indescribable scenery of Liangzhu, Wu Qi took a step forward. The surroundings suddenly darkened, and an enormous pressure came from all directions. His robe was crushed, and his long hair was straightened by an invisible force. Suddenly attacked, Wu Qi gave a long roar. Countless black dragon scales emerged from under his skin, and his body suddenly grew tens of feet tall. He slapped the air with his muscular arms, causing a deafening rumble that shook the surrounding space. Faint cries of surprise could be heard. Suddenly, Wu Qi's eyes shone, as he landed on the top of a hill. A few elderly men with black robes were holding bone staffs, staring at Wu Qi from over 100 meters away in shock. Large amounts of crushed energy stones and bone pieces fell on the ground. Obviously, these elderly men had secretly built a great formation, attempting to move Wu Qi from the river bank to somewhere else. But they didn't think that Wu Qi could react so fast, and was so strong. The formation was broken by Wu Qi once it was activated. Wu Qi quickly looked around. This place was high, and from here, he could clearly see Liangzhu City, which was over 200 miles away. This small mountain was surrounded by hills that stretched for hundreds of miles. Trees with straight trunks and entirely green bodies could be seen growing on these hills. The hill was covered in tens of meters tall trees, but just now, Wu Qi broke the formation with his great strength. The great power released by the formation flattened a big half of the hill, and hundreds of trees in the area were all turned into nothingness. Who sent you? What do you want? Wu Qi, who had transformed into a dragon man, had a dense cloud of dark mist coiled around his hands, within which countless ghost heads were sparkling and covered in a layer of complicated spell symbols. He stared at the few elderly men in black robes with a pair of stern eyes, slowly approaching them step by step. The few elderly men in black robes slowly raised their bone staffs as well. Without saying a word, they prepared to fight Wu Qi to death. Tens of dazzling beams of light rose from Liangzhu City. Tens of heavily armored warriors, each with a pair of white wings flapping on the back of their armors, were flying towards Wu Qi at top speed. Faintly, one could see the city walls of Liangzhu City begin to sparkle with a faint layer of light, and the sky above some manors and palaces outside the city was covered with a faint layer of light. Within a blink of an eye, Liangzhu City suddenly woke up like a sleeping beast, showing its claws and teeth without hesitation. The few elderly men in black robes stared at Wu Qi with ashen faces. One of them said with a dry voice, "Never mind, you actually destroyed our illusionary flying formation. We failed to complete the task assigned by our master, and we deserve to die, but you have ruined our master's great plan, so you deserve to die as well." Wu Qi suddenly pounced forward, attempting to capture one of them alive and interrogate him. But, when the few elderly men in black robes heard Chi-Chi's weird laughter, black blood gushed out of their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth simultaneously. Before long, their bodies disintegrated into puddles of dirty blood, and even their souls were corroded by the strong poison. What a cruel method! Wu Qi sensed a coldness from his back. He had just arrived in Liangzhu City for less than a day, but who wanted to do this to him? Chapter 733. In a garden somewhere outside Liangzhu, under a tall Bodhi tree, King Baishan and a handsome monk clad in a jade-colored monk robe were sitting opposite each other. The Bodhi tree was surrounded by countless restrictive spells that were visible and invisible to the naked eye, and a large group of King Baishan's trusted subordinates were hiding in the dark, keeping an eye on the surroundings. No one could easily break into this place. Holding a cup carved out of black stone, King Baishan sipped the tea from it. The monk, whose scalp was clean-shaven and who carried himself elegantly, was smiling and fiddling with a scroll made of silk that was as white as snow in front of him. On the scroll was a map that flickered with light and shadows, and it was marked with the words "Garrison Changing Map of Deyu's Western Heavenly Tribe." The sound of footsteps could be heard as King Zhang Qiu and Lord Long Yang, who was clad in a white robe, approached side by side. King Zhang Qiu bowed to King Baishan and called him "Father" respectfully. Lord Long Yang smiled and clapped his hands. White lotuses drifted out of his fingertips as he greeted the monk in a soft voice. Junior Long Yang offers greetings to Prabhudaratna Buddha. Prabhudaratna Buddha raised his eyelids and glanced at the white lotuses drifting down from Lord Long Yang's fingertips. He chuckled and said, "Recluse Long Yang and the Buddhist League are fated to meet, so there's no need to be overly courteous. By the way, has that Tan Lang been sent to prison Dragon Pool?" Lord Long Yang stood aside with a smile on his face, his eyelids slightly drooping, and did not say a word. King Zhang Qiu's face turned a little unsightly as he said in a deep voice, "I can't believe that Tan Lang has cultivated the dragon kill, and his physical strength, divine abilities, and magic power are not weak. I've sent a few oracles to lay out a formation to capture him, but he actually broke it halfway and escaped. King Baishan's face twitched slightly. Then, where are they now? He asked with a cold grin. They have taken the rotting soul pill, said King Zhangqiu coolly. Their flesh and bones have turned to mush, and their souls have perished. King Baishan's face relaxed abruptly. It's good that they are dead, he said coolly. Make sure their families are well compensated. Putting down the teacup in his hand, King Baishan turned to Prabhudaratna Buddha and said with a cold grin, I've already shouldered a great responsibility by escorting you here, Buddha. Let's call it a day. I won't risk my life for an insignificant boy again. If Buddha can kill him, then kill him. If you can't, then hurry back. Prabhudaratna Buddha rolled up the scroll and shoved it into his sleeve, then clasped his palms together and said in a deep voice, Merciful Buddha. Since your highness has helped me sneak into Yuxiong Plain, how can you let me go so easily? Your highness said that those old fellows from the Directorate of Celestials have left Yuxiong Plain. Is that true? King Zhangqiu interrupted, the tragic death of the former left minister of the Directorate of Celestials has enraged His Majesty. Many elders of the Directorate of Celestials, as well as the leaders of various departments, have been dispatched to search Pangu continent for the murderer. Now, apart from the Grand Oracle of the Directorate of Celestials, Bai Huangmu, the only ones who can pose a threat to you in Liangzhu are those from the secret palace. Prabhudaratna Buddha smiled. He slowly rose to his feet and said softly, those people from the secret palace? I've never worried about them. Unless I want to break into the palace and assassinate the human emperor, how can they possibly help me? How can a mere Bai Huangmu stop me from killing Tan Lang? Looking up at the sky, Prabhudaratna Buddha grinned coldly and said, since your highness can't capture Tan Lang and bring him to prison Dragon Pool, I'll have to kill him myself. Since he dared to kill the messenger sent by me, I will kill him in Liangzhu city. That way, some people will not think that we, the Buddhist League, are really meek and submissive, and swallow everything in silence. King Baishan and King Zhangqiu exchanged a quick glance. Then, King Zhangqiu took a step forward and said, Buddha, if you want to kill someone, please do it openly. It would be best if you can leave a message explaining why you kill. By the way, Tan Lang is now King Yufeng's most capable confidant, and it is said that Gao intends to cultivate him into a supreme oracle. Prabhudaratna Buddha arched his brows, laughed coldly, and shook his head with a gloomy face. How can a supreme oracle who cultivates both magic and fleshly body exist? Prabhudaratna Buddha sighed. I guess I can only ask him to take a trip to transmigration. If he knows what's good for him, my Buddhist kingdom still lacks a supreme Dharma king. I think he and the Buddhist League are fated. Lord Longyang put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha to Prabhudaratna Buddha with a smile. King Baishan glanced at Lord Longyang, then at his son, King Zhangqiu, and snorted disapprovingly. King Zhangqiu, on the other hand, smiled faintly. He looked at Lord Longyang, then at Prabhudaratna Buddha, and did not notice the expression on his father's face. Prabhudaratna Buddha gave a subtle smile. With a casual step, he disappeared from under the Bodhi tree. Outside Liangzhu, on top of a hill, Wu Qi was helplessly being questioned by a group of officials from Deyu's punishment court, whose faces were gloomy and stiff like fossils. Dozens of officials, whose cultivation bases had reached the 7 stars realm of the second Pangu heaven or above, were carefully searching for all kinds of useful clues near the half-collapsed hill. 12 officials surrounded Wu Qi, asking him questions about why he was here, what he had encountered, who he had met, and how the scene had turned into such a state. Even though Wu Qi had the seal and documents of the Marquis of East Sea Province to prove that he was a high-ranking noble of Deyu, these officials did not know what it meant to bend the law for personal gain. They did not care about Wu Qi's identity, and they just treated Wu Qi as the most common suspect, asking him all kinds of questions over and over again. After interrogating Wu Qi for a full quarter of an hour, the officials from the punishment court who were searching the scene had collected some melted slime, some broken formation discs and bone talismans, and a few broken bone staffs. Through the diligent efforts of these well-trained punishment court officials, they managed to piece together most of the fragments of the formation disc, and through a reverse deduction method, they were able to find the exact location where Wu Qi could be teleported to. Prison Dragon Pool was one of the most notorious forbidden lands in Yuxiong Plain. In ancient times, an evil dragon was wreaking havoc in Yuxiong Plain. At that time, Yu was struggling to escape from an apocalypse of heaven and earth. More than 80% of its elites were killed, and the remaining experts were all severely wounded, no longer able to kill the mighty evil dragon. Left with no other choice, Yu could only use all its power to suppress the evil dragon in Prison Dragon Pool, using its natural dangerous restrictive spells to imprison it. But, as a result of a mistake, the evil dragon was indeed suppressed, but Yu was so lucky that he actually managed to control all the dangerous restrictive spells in Prison Dragon Pool. Although the evil dragon could no longer escape from Prison Dragon Pool, because he had mastered all the restrictive spells in the pool, it had become a notorious forbidden land for Yu. Few people could be seen within 1,000 miles of it, and even those supreme oracles did not want to go there to stir up trouble. If Wu Qi was teleported to Prison Dragon Pool, with his overall strength of a 5th-tier gold immortal, he would definitely be killed. The officials of Punishment Court grew solemn. They were convinced that the explosion outside Liangzhu had nothing to do with Wu Qi. On the contrary, Wu Qi was the victim. Someone wanted to teleport Wu Qi, the newly minted Marquis of East Sea Province, to Prison Dragon Pool with a small-scale teleportation formation. It was murder, a murder against a new noble of Yu. In Yu, it was a serious crime, punishable by the extermination of an entire clan. Immediately, a signal was sent back to Liangzhu. More punishment court officials rushed to the scene and began to question Wu Qi about the appearance of the few old men who had set up the formation. At the same time, more and more capable punishment court officials rushed to the scene and began to search the surroundings of the mountain for any evidence that might be useful. Even Wu Qi was astounded by the meticulousness with which they searched. They even found a few strands of hair left on the ground after the bodies of the old men melted away. Wu Qi was glad that someone was going to help him track down the culprit behind the scenes. So, he cooperated with them and casually pointed his finger at the ground, causing a few clumps of mud to rush out from the ground. In just a blink of an eye, they transformed into the lifelike statues of the few old men. The people of Punishment Court quickly uprooted the statues and sent them back to Liangzhu. They were going to trace the identities of the old men based on these statues. As long as they had appeared in Liangzhu, with the strength of Punishment Court, they would be able to find out who they were. After such a long interrogation, the officials of Punishment Court had no more questions for Wu Qi. They solemnly warned Wu Qi that he had better stay in Liangzhu until the truth of the matter was found out. After all, Wu Qi was the Marquis of East Sea Province. If anything happened to him in Liangzhu, the entire Yu would feel ashamed. Wu Qi answered. As he was about to return to Liangzhu under the escort of a few punishment court officials, a white cloud suddenly rolled down gently from the sky toward the mountaintop. The cloud, which was a few miles in circumference, was filled with a faint fragrance and a deep chanting that went straight to the soul. It seemed to be moving slowly, but in fact, it enveloped the entire mountaintop at an incredible speed. The officials of Punishment Court, from the servants who had no cultivation base to the few punishment officers who had reached the 8 stars realm of Second Panga Heaven, all fainted. Snoring softly, they were swept up by the cloud without any resistance and sent to an unknown place. Amidst the dense cloud, Prabhudaratna Buddha, clad in a jade-colored monk robe and with a smile on his face, strolled out slowly. At the sight of the solemn Prabhudaratna Buddha in front of him, Wu Qi suddenly realized who he was. Prabhudaratna Buddha. Since Wu Qi came to Panga continent, he had offended several people from the Buddhist League. But, the only one who could find out his identity as Tan Lang and sneak into Yuxiong Plain to hunt him down was Prabhudaratna Buddha. Not only had Wu Qi killed his emissary, Mingli, but he had also given the monk's head to Gao as evidence and sent it to Dayu's imperial court. Wu Qi's casual act had allowed Dayu to make all kinds of arrangements against the Buddhist League. It would be strange if Prabhudaratna Buddha did not come looking for trouble with him. Prabhudaratna Buddha smiled faintly, put his palms together, and chanted, "Benefactor Tan Lang, you have made the Buddhist League suffer a lot." Then, he reached out his right hand, and a huge golden palm grabbed down toward Wu Qi amidst a thunderous chanting. Chapter 734. Currently, Wu Qi's fleshly strength was at the 5th tier of Gold Immortal Realm. Prabhudaratna Buddha, on the other hand, unleashed a claw attack with the overall strength of a 4th tier Gold Immortal, which was 1 tier higher than Wu Qi's. For Gold Immortals, the difference of 1 tier was usually at least 100 times greater. Prabhudaratna Buddha thought it would be a piece of cake for him to capture Wu Qi with a strength that was 100 times greater than his. Wu Qi snorted coldly as he stared at the golden palm that came with a suffocating pressure. Activating the dragon kill, Wu Qi abruptly transformed into a huge dragon man, standing 100 feet tall. His entire body was filled with a raging energy. Wu Qi recited an incantation and waved his fingertips rapidly in the air. Countless runes poured out like flowing water, transforming into a black talisman array that branded onto Wu Qi's body. With the enhancement of the talisman array, Wu Qi's strength suddenly soared by 1,000 times. The formidable power made Wu Qi's blood vessels swell, so much so that even the thick dragon scales could not conceal them. Soon, blood vessels as thick as buckets protruded from beneath his thick dragon scales, rolling on the surface of his body like flood dragons. His blood began to boil. What flowed in his veins was not only blood, but also half-solid dragon energy. Vaguely, dragon roars could be heard coming out from every swollen blood vessel. For a moment, it was as if 100 dragons were roaring inside Wu Qi's body. Ao Buzan's eyes went wide with horror. He stared blankly at Wu Qi and murmured under his breath, "Damn it! Don't tell me you're a mixed-blood child of some little dragons and a human. That doesn't make sense. Your fleshly body has been changed into a chaotic spirit body, and Lao Tzu has seen your human form. What does it have to do with you and the dragons? But, how did you cultivate the dragon transformation script to the point where your energy meridians can take the form of a dragon?" As one of the ancient dragons, Ao Buzan knew very well how difficult it was for someone like Wu Qi to cultivate to the stage where his blood could condense into the shape of a dragon and let out a heavenly dragon roar. Even among the top geniuses in the dragons, not many could do this. But Wu Qi was only a human. He was a human, not a dragon. How could he have developed the Dragon Transformation Sutra to such an extent? The pitch-black 9 nether-scattered soul ghost flame on Wu Qi's body soared into the sky, and within the black, sticky flame, one could vaguely see 9 dragons rising. Sharp and sonorous dragon roars rang out incessantly. Suddenly, 2 pitch-black dragon horns protruded from Wu Qi's forehead. In the void, some existences who were hiding in the spatial barrier with the help of powerful mystic artifacts exclaimed in surprise, to be able to unleash the dragon kill to such an incredible degree, and to be able to transform into a dragon, this kid's aptitude is really not bad. Could he be a hybrid between a human and a dragon? Of course, Wu Qi was not a hybrid between a human and a dragon. However, he had extorted the bloodlines of 100 divine beasts from the 1,000 Spirit Palace. As soon as Prabhudaratna Buddha made his move, Wu Qi immediately fused all 100 bloodlines into his body. His chaotic energy began to digest the Azure Dragon bloodline, and with the help of the 7 Foundation elevating technique, the structure of Wu Qi's body began to transform into that of an Azure Dragon. He carefully controlled the changes in his body. Apart from his outer appearance, which still looked like an ordinary humanoid dragon's, all of Wu Qi's muscles and blood meridians had turned into the flesh of dragons. By using the dragon kill with a pure dragon's body, Wu Qi's physical strength was immediately enhanced to an incredible degree. Accompanied by loud noises made by his muscles and bones pressing against each other, the scales and dragon horns on the surface of Wu Qi's body took on a mysterious and noble light green color. Accompanied by a deep and muffled incantation, the dragon horns on Wuqi's forehead emitted two streams of light that looked like water ripples. Countless runes rapidly intertwined in the light, transforming into a huge rune formation that imprinted itself onto Wuqi's chest. A tremendous power surged in his body like a tidal wave, and Wuqi's physical strength was suddenly increased by 3,000 times. This was the limit that Wuqi's current physical strength could withstand. Although the dragon kill could increase Wuqi's physical strength by 10,000 times using even more powerful runes, his physical strength could not withstand such a great increase. 3,000 times the physical strength was the strongest power that Wuqi could control and use at the moment. He opened his mouth and sprayed out a stream of 9 nether ghost flame, which dimmed the golden palm that was almost pressing down on him. A large amount of black filthy energy and death energy mixed into the golden palm. Then, Wuqi raised both hands and slapped the golden palm. A loud rumble echoed out as the golden palm that Prabhudaratna Buddha had casually thrust out, thinking that he could easily capture Wuqi, was smashed to pieces. With the help of the dragon kill, Wuqi's current strength was infinitely close to the level of a second-tier gold immortal. So, how could the palm unleashed by Prabhudaratna Buddha, which was only as strong as a fourth-tier gold immortal, withstand Wuqi's all-out attack? The golden palm crumbled with a loud rumble, and countless translucent fragments, each the size of a fist, fell all over the ground. These golden fragments were the condensation of Prabhudaratna Buddha's pure Buddhist power. When Wuqi shattered his palm, he lost control of his Buddhist power, and so they crumbled and shattered like real objects. Gradually, the fragments melted and turned into a pale golden Buddhist power that spread in all directions. Nourished by this Buddhist power, the stones on the ground, which were already rich in natural energy, were gradually transformed into relics and jades. Soon, half of the mountain was glowing brightly as if it was made of pearls and jade. Prabhudaratna Buddha's face, which was as round and shiny as a pearl, suddenly turned livid. As one of the famous Buddhas of the Buddhist League, the master of billions of heavenly realms and outer heavenly realms, how many years had it been since he had fought in person? As Wuqi had killed the emissary he had sent out, in order to retaliate against Wuqi and deter Yu from doing something against the Buddhist League, Prabhudaratna Buddha had personally come to Panga continent. But, the attack he had just calculated was easily resolved by Wuqi. Shameful, shameful. Wuqi was just a puny existence as strong as a gold immortal. Although he was much stronger than an ant, he was still insignificant in the face of an existence as strong as a Buddha. But, he had actually nullified Prabhudaratna Buddha's attack. It was a great disgrace to the Buddha. Taking a deep breath, Prabhudaratna Buddha said coldly to Wuqi, "Vile creature, you're courting death. I had intended to take you in as my Dharma king, but since you're so ungrateful, your fate with the Buddhist League is completely cut off. Today, I'm going to vanquish you, the evildoer who stands in the way of the Buddhist League's glory." Prabhudaratna Buddha slowly raised both hands, and a golden bell and a jade bell emerged in his palms. The golden bell glowed with a dazzling radiance, and an extremely sharp energy could be vaguely seen shooting out from it. The jade bell was filled with a dense mist, from which a crisp chime would occasionally ring out, as if it came straight from the depths of one's soul, making one feel drowsy and want to fall asleep. Prabhudaratna Buddha was famous for his artificing skills in the Buddhist League. He was one of the best artificing grandmasters in the Buddhist League. All the Buddhist artifacts he crafted were of the finest quality. Those Buddhas and Bodhisattvas often had to spend several laborious Buddhist kingdoms in their palms to exchange for one or two artifacts from Prabhudaratna Buddha. The golden bell and the jade bell were Prabhudaratna Buddha's prime evil-subduing treasures, which he had crafted for himself at great cost. They were extremely powerful and possessed boundless mystical abilities. The clear chime of the jade bell shook Wuqi's divine soul, while the golden bell flew up into the sky. Inside of it, 18 golden dragons were wheeling and dancing. Countless Buddhist weapons, such as devil-subduing blades, devil-subduing swords, vajra swords, lotus seals, and many others, were glinting with a blinding golden light as they shot out from the mouth of the bell, smashing down toward Wuqi like raindrops. These weapons were refined from the acquired energy of metal and Buddha's power. Each of them could be big or small, hard or soft, light or heavy. When they were light, they were as light as a feather, but when they were heavy, they were as heavy as Mount Tai. Now that Prabhudaratna Buddha had lost a great deal of face, he had no choice but to control the golden bell with all his might, unleashing countless devil-subduing weapons and smashing them toward Wu Qi with all his might. Each of the weapons was gleaming with a cold light, extremely sharp, and as heavy as Mount Tai. The gleaming blades danced in the air, as if they were trying to tear Wu Qi into pieces. Wu Qi tried swinging his arm to meet one of the devil-subduing blades. A crisp cracking sound rang out as Wu Qi's huge arm, which was as thick as a water tank, was easily cut open by the devil-subduing blade. His tough dragon scales and muscles could not stop the sharpness of the blade, and blood sprayed out like a fountain. The momentum of the devil-subduing blade did not diminish, and it continued to cut open Wu Qi's muscles and bones. Fortunately, Wu Qi was quick enough to pull back his arm, as the blade nearly cut his forearm off. He took a few steps back in horror. Despite his strong fleshly body, Wu Qi could not withstand the countless Buddhist magical artifacts that shot out from the golden bell, and even a casual strike from a devil-subduing blade. If all these weapons were to fall on his body, wouldn't he be chopped into meat paste? In a moment of desperation, Wu Qi shook his arms, and the cut opened by the devil-subduing blade quickly healed. A large plume of purple mist that could be seen with naked eyes wrapped around Wu Qi's arm. Then, he pointed a finger at the blood that sprayed out of his mouth, causing it to fly up and turn into countless twisting and vicious runes, forming into a talisman formation that looked like a viper, which then shot toward Prabhudaratna Buddha with a hissing sound. It was one of the countless vicious restrictive spells of the Directorate of Celestials, the myriad snakes devouring curse. Anyone who was hit by it would suffer the pain of having their heart devoured by thousands of snakes, and the pain could kill them. With Wu Qi's current cultivation base, even a top-tier gold immortal would not dare to let his restrictive spell hit his body. But Prabhudaratna Buddha was a mighty figure. Looking at the curse unleashed by Wu Qi, he sneered and said, "How can a grain of rice shine so brilliantly? Die, you vile creature." Dozens of Vajra swords flashing with golden gleams and emanating a frigid aura flew out of the golden bell, easily shattering the restrictive spell unleashed by Wu Qi. His spell was destroyed, and the backlash of his energy made his body sway and stagger back several dozens of steps. Blood was oozing out from under the scales on his chest. The spells of the Directorate of Celestials were vicious and ferocious. If they could not hurt the enemy, they would definitely hurt themselves. In the past, a few of Yu Mu's disciples and sons had failed to kill Wu Qi with spells, and were killed by Yu Huai's counterattack. Countless weapons of the Buddhist League shot out of the golden bell and enveloped Wu Qi's body in a messy manner. Wu Qi sneered in a deep voice. Suddenly, a beam of black light shot out of the top of his head, from which came the newborn Darkeen Celestial Tower, which transformed into a dark shadow and shielded him. Without holding back, Wu Qi poured all his energy into the tower, causing the flow of time within a mile around him to suddenly increase by 100 times. The flow of time around Wu Qi's body had increased by 100 times, but the flow of time around those weapons remained the same. Like a stream of light, Wu Qi shuttled back and forth among the countless weapons with ease, but none of them could touch him. Prabhudaratna Buddha's face turned even weirder. "You can control the flow of time. I can't let you live." Then, he flipped his palms, and the jade bell in Prabhudaratna Buddha's palms gave out a slow and clear ringing. Chapter 735. Relying on the fact that the flow of time was 100 times faster, the Darkeen Celestial Tower hovering over Wu Qi's head allowed him to shuttle back and forth between the countless weapons like a ghost. His movements were light and agile, and he was not threatened by them at all. Step by step, he approached Prabhudaratna Buddha with the 9 nether ghost flame burning fiercely around him, and the shadows of 9 dragons formed by the filthy and evil ghost flame were gradually taking shape behind him. Wu Qi did not expect to escape from Prabhudaratna Buddha. The man was a Buddha, while his cultivation base was only that of a 5th-tier gold immortal, which was forcibly pushed up by the virtues of the heavenly Tao. He had not even fully mastered his current strength. How could a mere gold immortal slip away from the palm of a Buddha? Wouldn't that mean that he had underestimated the existence who stood at the pinnacle of this world and thought too highly of himself? Even if he could not escape, he had to get a piece of flesh from Prabhudaratna Buddha. Besides, this was Liangzhu, the capital city of Diyu. Was Prabhudaratna Buddha not courting death by killing people outside the city? No matter how he came to Liangzhu, Wu Qi firmly believed that he would not be able to leave easily now that he was here. Putting aside the grand oracle of the Directorate of Celestials, Bai Huangmu, whose cultivation base was unfathomable, just a few of those lunatics from the elders of the secret palace could easily tear Prabhudaratna Buddha to pieces. Although some people said that it was impossible for a primordial immortal to be besieged and killed, Wu Qi had seen a fallen primordial immortal. Even Reverend Gale was killed by the many gods sent by the Eastern Green Emperor, so there was no reason why Prabhudaratna Buddha could survive. As long as he could hold on a little longer, reinforcements would surely arrive in Liangzhu. Before that, he had to get a piece of flesh from Prabhudaratna Buddha. The flesh of a Buddha. For some reason, when he looked at Prabhudaratna Buddha's face that shone like a pearl, Wu Qi suddenly felt saliva dripping from his mouth, just like how Ao Buzan, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn usually behaved when they were hungry. At this critical juncture, Wu Qi absurdly thought of the meat of Tang Sanzang described in the novels he had read in the past. Prabhudaratna Buddha was a Buddha after all. He was born with such delicate skin and tender flesh, so his flesh should be of better quality and taste better than Tripitaka's, right? TSK, if they could chop off his legs and bring them back to feed Gold Horn and Silver Horn, their cultivation bases would definitely improve greatly. Step by step, he walked toward Prabhudaratna Buddha. The flow of time around Wu Qi was extremely fast. The harmony between space and time was disturbed by his footsteps, and a strange scene of time and space twisting appeared around Wu Qi. Dozens of incomparably sharp lotus swords slashed at his head, but they were shattered by the hazy and distorted space. The pure golden hepta chi was swallowed by Wu Qi's body and turned into his strength in the blink of an eye. With the two dragon horns growing out of his forehead emitting a faint glow, Wu Qi recited an incantation in a deep voice and quickly performed a hand incantation gesture. Using the poisonous dragon heart-burning seal found in the dragon kill as the core, he kept piling up one vicious rune after another. The flow of time around Wu Qi was 100 times faster than the outside world, so in the eyes of an outsider, Wu Qi's movements were so fast that they could not be seen clearly. Before long, a bell-shaped shadow the size of a human head formed in his palm. It was composed of 99 runes and looked like a corporeal entity. Countless vicious and ferocious runes were twisting and intertwining with each other in the bell-shaped shadow, producing deep rumbling noises from time to time. While laughing strangely, Wu Qi came before Prabhudaratna Buddha step by step. Carefully, he held the seal and pressed it toward Prabhudaratna Buddha's heart. Prabhudaratna Buddha struck the jade bell just in time, producing a crisp ring that towered into the sky. Wu Qi's divine soul trembled, and his strong innate divine soul was nearly shattered by the bell ring. He threw his head back and coughed out a mouthful of pale red mist, then staggered backward. It was a simple chime, but it contained an extremely terrible power. Wu Qi's divine soul was trembling, and every cell in his body was trembling rapidly. The dragon scales on his skin cracked and broke in just a blink of an eye, and the two dragon horns on his head were broken as well. Blood sprayed out of his body like a fountain. Prabhudaratna Buddha smiled peacefully. He looked at Wu Qi and said, "You deserve to die in my hands, you evil creature." Wu Qi's innate divine soul trembled violently, then suddenly folded inwards. Not only did it not shatter, but it even shone with an even more dazzling light. A dragon roar came out of Wu Qi's mouth. The black light in Wu Qi's eyes shone tens of feet away as he cried out, "You want me to die? How can it be so easy?" An innate divine soul was not something an acquired soul could compare with. Wu Qi's divine soul was filled with the chaotic power, which could not be broken by any ordinary magic or divine ability. On top of that, he had absorbed the soul essence power of countless living beings, and after being purified and tempered by the divine flame of order, he was able to produce the innate chaotic divine soul he had today. Although the bell toll of Prabhudaratna Buddha could kill all the gold immortals under the heaven, it could not kill Wu Qi. With both hands pointing out, the bell-shaped shadow on Prabhudaratna Buddha's chest exploded with a boom. "Have a taste of my multiple curses!" Wu Qi cried out fiercely. 99 layers of vicious runes exploded at the same time, each with a terrible power. Poisonous smoke, poisonous flame, phosphorescence, chilly wind, and many other evil powers kept eroding Prabhudaratna Buddha's golden body. Like a red-hot iron plate touching a cold water, half of Prabhudaratna Buddha's body was enveloped by thick smoke and ghost fire, and sizzling noises could be heard from time to time. With a cold snort, Prabhudaratna Buddha casually clapped his hands and extinguished all the poisonous flame and evil aura. His body was unharmed. The Buddhist League was proficient in all kinds of cultivation techniques for the indestructible body, and Prabhudaratna Buddha was an expert in the Tao of artifact crafting. On top of that, he attached great importance to his golden body. Ever since he joined the Buddhist League in his first life, he had been practicing all kinds of divine abilities and mystic arts to temper his fleshly body. After thousands of reincarnations and becoming a Buddha, his body had almost reached the point where it could not be moved even by 1,000 tribulations. Wu Qi had tried his best to hurt Prabhudaratna Buddha, but he could do nothing to his mighty golden body. Panting heavily, Wu Qi fixed his eyes on Prabhudaratna Buddha. With his current cultivation base, he could not threaten him at all. But, Prabhudaratna Buddha's golden and jade bells did not work on him either. As a mighty Buddha, he had failed to capture or kill a gold immortal 3 times in a row. His face twisted like a fox with diarrhea, and his expression was extremely unsightly. Is your soul all right?" Prabhudaratna Buddha stared fixedly at Wu Qi. He did not want to believe that Wu Qi could survive a frontal attack from the celestial artifact he had forged with his own hands. Even though he did not unleash the power of the jade bell with all his might, he had unleashed at least 30% of its power. It was a terrible power that could make even a primordial immortal frown. Not to mention Wu Qi, a mere 5th-tier gold immortal. Even if there were 10,000 gold immortals here, they would all be killed by the sound of the bell. But, why was Wu Qi unharmed? Wu Qi rubbed his head, then tried his best to shake his neck. Although the bell did not kill him, it shook him so much that he almost fainted. Now that Prabhudaratna Buddha had asked such a stupid question, Wu Qi gave him a disdainful look and said with a mocking smile, "It seems I've disappointed you, bald donkey." With a strange laugh, Wu Qi suddenly grabbed Ao Buzan's tail and gave it a hard squeeze. Ao Buzan gave a long cry, opened his mouth, and sprayed out a column of stinking black water. As the water column rubbed against the air, it immediately sprayed out a large expanse of crimson flame. The temperature in the surroundings rose abruptly, and the hill was quickly melted into a plume of smoke amidst the whistling sound of the wind and fire. It showed how powerful Ao Buzan's fire column was. Putting aside Ao Buzan, the dragon python sisters looked up cleverly and unleashed 2 beams of light, one gold and one silver, which wrapped around Ao Buzan's fire column and shot toward Prabhudaratna Buddha at the same time. The golden beam of light had increased the power of Ao Buzan's fire column by a few times, while the silver beam was extremely cold. It compressed the power of Ao Buzan's fire column into a thin line, increasing its penetrating power by a few times. Prabhudaratna Buddha gave a cold snort as he glanced disdainfully and greedily at Ao Buzan, who was lying on Wu Qi's head, and the dragon python sisters on his shoulder. The ancient black dragon and the dragon pythons of fire and ice were both excellent materials for crafting weapons. Then, he casually slapped his palm toward the tricolored fire column and said with a sigh, "Evil creature, this is Liangzhu after all, and I don't have time to play with you anymore. This time, you will die for sure." In Prabhudaratna Buddha's impression, this palm strike should easily shatter the tricolored fire column, and then he would not hesitate to use his golden body of Buddha to kill Wu Qi with one blow. After that, he would leave Yuxiong Plain as fast as he could to evade the pursuit of the expert oracles sent by Diyu. Prabhudaratna Buddha was horrified to find that his palm had become weak and powerless. The tricolored fire easily pierced through his palm and hit his chest. The strange hot airflow and cold air rushed into his indestructible golden body of Buddha. Then, a loud boom rang out, and a large patch of flesh and bones on Prabhudaratna Buddha's chest exploded. Some of them were burning fiercely, while some were quickly frozen into ice cubes. This was... Wu Qi was stunned. Were Ao Buzan and his companions so powerful? Ao Buzan was stunned as well. He lifted his upper body stiffly, pointed his claws at Prabhudaratna Buddha, and murmured to himself, "This monk must be a playboy. He must have practiced the delightful Zen the wrong way last night and given all his cultivation base to his woman. Otherwise, how could he be so weak?" The dragon python sisters stared at each other in bewilderment. How could he seriously injure a Buddha with just one strike? How was that possible? They looked at each other in bewilderment. It was impossible. They knew how strong their cultivation base was. They could deal with ordinary gold immortals, but the one in front of them was a Buddha at the level of primordial immortal. Prabhudaratna Buddha was even more stunned. He stared in horror at his pierced palm and shattered chest, then howled at the top of his voice, "My indestructible golden body, my... No, what is this? What is this? This is the Avicii incense, a treasure specially made to deal with golden bodies of Buddhas." A cold voice rang out from the sky. The void rippled, and then 18 pitch-black supreme towers of different shapes emerged out of thin air. Immediately after that, the void in the 4 directions of the hill trembled, and then 6 supreme towers emerged from each direction. The ground below collapsed with a rumble, revealing a huge, bottomless pit, in which 18 supreme towers hovered above the bottomless abyss. Up, down, left, right, front, back, all 6 directions were sealed off by a terrifying energy. Prabhudaratna Buddha was dumbfounded. Chapter 736. Each Tower of Babel represented a high priest. Each supreme oracle was strong enough to fight against a primordial expert. There were 60 supreme towers in total, which meant there were 60 supreme oracles gathered here. And that was just the strength on the surface. Each supreme tower was not only a means of transportation, a place for daily living and cultivation, but also a place where he taught his disciples. Each supreme tower was equivalent to a battle fortress, and there could not be only one supreme oracle in it. For example, Yu Gu, whom Wu Qi was familiar with, had hundreds of disciples, nearly 10,000 servants and maids, and 30,000 armored guards with superb cultivation bases in his supreme tower. The space in a supreme tower could be compressed as the cultivation base of its owner increased, so it was very easy for it to accommodate tens of thousands of people. The 60 supreme towers represented not only 60 supreme oracles, but also 60 armies that could appear at any time. Except for an unlucky guy like Gaochen Guang, who Wu Qi had killed when he summoned his thunder tribulation and sneaked out to attack those younger heaven immortals and itinerant cultivators without bringing any attendants with him, and was killed by Wu Qi in the end. No matter where they went, the other supreme oracles always brought their disciples and guards with them. Surrounded by so many people, Prabhudaratna Buddha's face was extremely unsightly. Looking at his twitching face that looked like he was about to cry, Wu Qi felt that he was a lecher who had sneaked out in the middle of the night to stop a little girl, only to be raped by a group of ferocious female yakshas. Prabhudaratna Buddha wanted to cry but had no tears. He just wanted to kill Wu Qi, a nobody, to avenge his disciple, give Deyu dynasty a little warning, and show off his political and martial arts skills in front of the other Buddhas. But why were there 60 supreme oracles ambushing him? Did King Baishan not tell him that all the supreme oracles around Liangzhu had gone out to investigate the cause of Gaochen Guang's death? Apart from the oracles of the secret palace, there was only the grand oracle of the Directorate of Celestials, Bai Huangmu. King Baishan swore that Prabhudaratna Buddha only needed to focus on killing Wu Qi, and he did not need to worry that someone would interfere with his plan. In that case, where did these 60 supreme high priests come from? Standing on the top of a supreme tower, Yu Gu smiled and waved at Wu Qi. "Marquis of East Sea Province, step aside now. Marquis of Prefecture is indeed a good son of mine, you. Even a Buddha couldn't do anything to you in 3 consecutive strikes. After today's battle, your reputation will be even more resounding. Wu Qi chuckled. He shook his body and retracted the evil dragon kill, returning to his human form. After spitting out a mouthful of saliva that reeked of blood, Wu Qi put away the dark Yin celestial tower, flew up into the air, and landed beside Yu Gu. Yu Gu handed him a bottle of potion that tasted a little earthy. Wu Qi drank it without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, a warm stream flowed through his body, healing his external injuries quickly, and before long, there were no more wounds on his body. Unwillingly, Prabhudaratna Buddha gave Wu Qi a look, then threw his head back and chanted, "Greetings, fellow Taoists." The cold voice rang out again, "No matter how polite you are, it's useless. Today, you will die here, bald donkey. We've spent more than a year trying to find the murderer of my brother, and now, you've come to Yu Xiong Plain to seek death, violating my prohibition. So, I'll kill you as a sacrifice to my brother." On top of a pitch-black supreme tower with 4 strange statues of demon beasts standing at the 4 corners of its base, a tall old man with a cold face was standing with his hands clasped behind his back. Floating beside the old man was a faint black cloud. Sitting on top of the cloud was a bronze, ancient, and mottled statue of a naked Buddha. Wu Qi gave the 36 feet tall statue a deep look. Just like the golden statue of the ancient Buddha that Patriarch Miaoying used to suppress the fiend formation at the bottom of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, this was also an ancient golden Buddha. Nowadays, the golden bodies cultivated by the Buddhas of the Buddhist League were either golden, ivory, colorful glass, or white crystal. But, only the ancient Buddhas who cultivated the purest and purest great Tao of the ancient Buddhist League would leave behind a golden body in the color of bronze. The golden bodies of ancient Buddhas were much stronger than the golden bodies of Buddhas of today, and anyone with a little bit of experience could recognize the aura of these golden bodies. But, there was a small hole on the top of the head of this golden body of ancient Buddha, and a very fine wisp of unknown hair was inserted into the head. A tiny flame as small as a bean was burning slowly on the wick. Wu Qi opened his Dharma eyes of myriad ghosts and gave the wick a careful look, but he could not find anything special about it. Carefully, under the cover of the Dharma eyes of myriad ghosts, he also secretly exercised his chaotic divine eyes and gave the wick a glance. Only then did he discover that there was a very faint smoke drifting out of the wick. Wu Qi looked at the wick, then at Prabhudaratna Buddha, who was wounded by the joint attack of Ao Buzan and the dragon python sisters. Suddenly, he understood why Prabhudaratna Buddha was injured. This smoke wasn't anything good. Prabhudaratna Buddha saw the golden body of ancient Buddha as well. Trembling, he pointed a finger at the cold-faced old man and snapped, "How dare you profane the sacred bone of an ancient Buddha? This is a sacred object of my Buddhist sect. You've got guts." The old man lowered his head and looked down at Prabhudaratna Buddha as he said coolly, "I am Gaochenli, so of course I am bold. It is just an inanimate object, so why do you Buddhists value it so much? Instead of leaving it for you to worship in a shrine, I might as well refine it with a mystic technique and turn it into the Avici incense to destroy the golden bodies of you Buddhist cultivators." Gaochenli gave a strange smile and said with a gloomy voice, "The Avici incense comes from the story of the Avici hell. As long as a Buddhist cultivator smells this incense, after the time it takes to finish a pot of tea, that is, for a full quarter of an hour, unless he has truly obtained an indestructible supreme golden body of the Buddhist League. Even for a Buddha like you, bald donkey, your golden body will be no different from an ordinary mortal for a quarter of an hour." Prabhudaratna Buddha stared at Gaochenli in panic and snapped, "Do you really dare to kill me?" Said Gaochenli coolly, "Since someone dared to kill the clan leader of the Gaochen clan and the imperial advisor of Diyu, why wouldn't you, a mere Prabhudaratna Buddha, kill him? Besides, you were the one who violated the human emperor's ban, breaking into Yu Xiong Plain and killing the Marquis of Diyu province. Even if you go to your Lord Buddha and reason with him, he can only say that you deserve to die." Before Gaochenli's voice could fade, Prabhudaratna Buddha had already let out a long cry. The golden bell hovering above his head gave a deafening rumble, and countless magical artifacts of the Buddhist League shot whistling out in all directions, bringing with them a cold breeze. In the blink of an eye, at least millions of Buddhist weapons shot out, glinting with cold gleams. The void within a radius of 100 miles was occupied by these Buddhist weapons. Surrounded by a pale golden Buddhist power, the incomparably sharp Buddhist weapons shot in all directions, shattering the void wherever they passed. However, although these weapons could shatter the void, they could not break the supreme towers, which were guarded by supreme oracles. 60 sky-reaching towers released a large sheet of black light at the same time, merging into one. Within the thick black light, countless ghosts and monsters were coiling around, and a large number of spell symbols were flowing quickly in the black light screen like flowing water. Countless pale golden Buddhist weapons were tangled up by the black light, and shrill howls of ghosts and deities could be heard echoing out. In the blink of an eye, these extremely powerful weapons, which even Wu Qi's Dharma idol could not defend against, shattered one after another. Gao Chunli sneered. A pitch-black bone hammer made of an unknown bone flew whistling up into the sky, surrounded by a sheet of green flame that was only the size of a fist. With a sway in the air, 9 gigantic celestial fiends emerged around the bone hammer. Accompanied by a deafening rumble, the bone hammer, which had expanded to 1,000 feet long, plunged down from the sky with the 9 celestial fiends, knocking Prabhudaratna Buddha's golden bell to the ground. Before Prabhudaratna Buddha could snatch back his treasure of fiend refinement, Yugu laughed evilly and stamped his foot. Immediately, dozens of huge green-striped spiders rushed out of his supreme tower. These ferocious venomous bugs lifted their buttocks and sprayed out spider webs that were as thick as chicken eggs and stinking. Countless spider webs wrapped around the golden bell and dragged it over to Yugu in an instant. Yugu quickly fished out 13 spirit talismans made of demon beast skins from under his sleeve and stuck them on the golden bell. No matter how Prabhudaratna Buddha roared and howled, or how he chanted and performed incantation gestures, the golden bell only swayed a few times, and could not fly back to him. Prabhudaratna Buddha cursed angrily. With a wave of his hands, hundreds of magical artifacts of the Buddhist League flew out from around him, gleaming with golden light. These Buddhist magical items were forged by Prabhudaratna Buddha himself with the best materials he had accumulated over countless tribulations. Some of them had been given to the bodhisattvas and arhats under his sect, but he was reluctant to give most of them to others. So, he had been keeping them in his body and nourishing them. Today was a critical situation. If he did not fight with all his might, he would be killed on the spot. So, regardless of the heartache he had over his wealth, he unleashed all the magical artifacts he had, wrapping himself with hundreds of them, and was ready to rush out from the west. As long as he could break through a small opening, he was confident that he could leave Pangu continent. After all, for an almighty expert of the primordial realm, one step was the distance between heaven and earth, and it would only take him a few breaths of time to return to his Buddhist kingdom. But, how could the trap laid out by 60 supreme oracles allow Prabhudaratna Buddha to escape? The bone hammer in Gao Chunli's hand fell whistling through the air, knocking a few magical artifacts to the ground with each strike. The other supreme oracles followed suit, and in less than 2 breaths of time, even the jade bell in Prabhudaratna Buddha's hand was snatched away. Prabhudaratna Buddha was like a wealthy man who was robbed by thieves in the depths of the mountains. In just a few moves, he was stripped clean by a group of experts. Apart from his monk robe, he had lost all his magical artifacts. With a furious roar, Prabhudaratna Buddha gritted his teeth and produced his natal relic, trying to fight back. But, the 60 supreme towers suddenly closed inwards, and the joint attack of 60 supreme oracles, whose cultivation bases were not weaker than Prabhudaratna Buddha, immediately crushed Prabhudaratna Buddha, who had lost his mighty golden body. A deafening rumble rang out, and a vast amount of golden flesh and blood splattered down. Ao Buzan and the dragon python sisters roared happily, opened their mouths, and rushed out to devour the flesh and blood. Prabhudaratna Buddha had fallen outside Liangzhu. Wu Qi, on the other hand, looked thoughtfully at the spot where Prabhudaratna Buddha had fallen. How could a mighty Buddha be so unlucky as to be surrounded by 60 supreme oracles? Chapter 737. Just like that, a Buddha had fallen. Wu Qi sensed a strong aura of conspiracy from the fall of Prabhudaratna Buddha. Prabhudaratna Buddha was a primordial immortal Buddha, an important figure of the Buddhist League, and one of the 8 Buddhas who were responsible for the Buddhist League's missionary work on Panga continent, had foolishly come to Panga continent, violated the human emperor's ban, and sneaked into Yuxiong plain just to vent his anger on a nobody like Wu Qi. And Wu Qi, a nobody, had unknowingly acted as bait. As soon as Prabhudaratna Buddha struck, 60 supreme oracles, who were said to be searching for Gaochen Guang's murderer, suddenly appeared and killed Prabhudaratna Buddha in just a few moves. No matter how one looked at it, it smelled like a conspiracy. Hundreds of oracles were busy cleaning up the battlefield. For to use oracles, the materials of a Buddha, even a single hair, were extremely precious treasures. For example, if he had armpit hair, it could be made into a poisonous arrow that could chase after a soul for 10,000 miles, and it could destroy all kinds of Dharma bodies of immortals and Buddhist League's golden bodies, which was extremely lethal to cultivators who practiced the Tao of immortals and Buddhas. Buddha's bones could be made into extremely powerful talismans, Buddha's skin could be made into protective clothing, Buddha's muscles could be used to concoct elixirs, or directly fed to all kinds of poisonous insects and beasts, all of which could greatly enhance their cultivation. Especially the Buddha's brain, the oracles had a mystic art to extract part of the Buddha's memories from his brain. Whether it was the divine abilities of the Buddhist League they cultivated or some information in their memories, they were all extremely valuable strategic information to Du. Therefore, apart from the flesh and blood that Ao Buzan and the dragon python sisters had devoured, every piece of Prabhudaratna Buddha's broken bones, rotten flesh, and every strand of hair were carefully collected by these oracles. They were so meticulous that they did not miss anything. The broken body parts they collected could basically be used to piece together Prabhudaratna Buddha's body. Wu Qi stood aside innocently, watching the oracles digging 3 feet into the ground to collect the materials of Prabhudaratna Buddha. In a flurry, Yu Gu was directing his disciples to fight for a bone with another Supreme Oracle's disciple. It was a transparent, 7-colored phalanx. This phalanx was clearly filled with Buddhist power. It was a rare Buddhist sacred object. If it was used to refine a magic tool, it could be refined into a very powerful treasure. If you were to offer this finger bone as a sacrifice, the value of such a tiny piece of finger bone would definitely be equal to the benefits obtained by sacrificing hundreds of thousands of heaven immortals. Dozens of low-grade oracles were fighting over the finger bone, while Yu Gu and the Supreme Oracle were arguing with each other. Wu Qi stood aside and listened to their argument in a daze. It seemed that Yu Gu and this unknown Supreme Oracle were related by marriage. But for the sake of this Buddha's phalanx, the two of them tore at each other's skin, pointing out all the shameful things the other had done. In the end, it was Yu Gu who was more shameless. He triumphantly obtained the phalanx, while the defeated Supreme Oracle sulkily led his disciples to another small mound and fought with another Supreme Oracle for a few drops of Prabhudaratna Buddha's blood. Complacently, he hid the finger bone under his sleeve. Only then did he realize that Wu Qi was still there. He turned to Wu Qi and said with a smile, "What are you still doing here, Marquis of Zhou Province? The matter here has been settled. You can do whatever you want, Marquis of Zhou." Wu Qi paused, then pointed at himself and said, "I'm done here." But, this. At first, it was a few old men who laid out a teleportation formation to send Wu Qi to prison Dragon Pool. Then, it was Prabhudaratna Buddha who attacked Wu Qi. Then, it was this group of Supreme Oracles who suddenly appeared and shamelessly crushed Prabhudaratna Buddha to pieces. Wu Qi felt that he was the victim. He had just been interrogated by the officials of the punishment court for a long time. So, why did he suddenly have nothing to do with this? Ao Buzan and the dragon python sisters were burping on his shoulder. It did not seem to be a loss if he left now. But, Wu Qi did not feel good about it. He had been the bait, and now he was sent away. Nothing good at all. Gao Chenli, who was carefully tidying up a section of Prabhudaratna Buddha's spine and delightedly putting it into a black jade jar and soaking it in a medicinal liquid, raised his head and said coolly, "Marquis of East Sea Province, this is indeed none of your business. Prabhudaratna Buddha was the one who wanted to scheme against you. Now that he has been killed, this matter has nothing to do with you." A gleam flickered in his eyes as he nodded and said, "I have a very high opinion of you, Marquis of East Sea Province, for you to survive the 3 attacks of a Buddha. If you have time, you can come to visit us." With a strange smile on his face, Gao Chenli said coolly, "The Gaochen family has a batch of daughters who have just grown up, and each of them is a beauty that can topple a nation. If you are interested, Marquis of Donghai Province, it would be good for you to marry into our family." After pondering for a moment, Gao Chenli smiled and said, "With the help of us, Marquis of East Sea Province, you might have a chance to break through to the connecting heaven realm in the future. If you marry a daughter of the Gaochen family, we will all be one family. In the future, the Gaochen family will surely take care of the development of East Sea Province." Gao Chenli's tone was very calm. When he talked about marrying Wu Qi, his tone sounded like he was rewarding Wu Qi. It was as if Wu Qi had given Wu Qi a great honor by marrying a daughter of the Gaochen family. His words also implied that he was giving O Yangming enough honor by marrying a daughter of the Gaochen family. If O Yangming did not take the initiative to ask for her hand in marriage, he would not know how to appreciate it. Gao Chenli's words even implied that he was using O Yangming as bait this time. Since O Yangming had done a good job as a bait, even if O Yangming was a little annoyed, he would still be satisfied with a daughter of the Gaochen family as compensation. Yu Gu's face flickered slightly. He gave Gao Chenli a look, then suddenly burst out laughing, grabbed Wu Qi, and threw him out of the city. Wu Qi cursed under his breath. His body flew uncontrollably along with a gust of wind, and in the blink of an eye, Yu Gu brought him to the city gate. "A bunch of old bastards." Wu Qi cursed under his breath as he stared furiously in the direction of the hill where the battle had just taken place. The fact that Gao Chenli could say that Wu Qi had survived the 3 attacks from Prabhudaratna Buddha proved that these old fellows had been watching the battle for a long time, but none of them had stepped in to help. It was only when Prabhudaratna Buddha was poisoned by the Avici incense and his fleshly body was weakened to the limit that they came out to take advantage of the situation. Wu Qi felt a little upset. He was to use Marquis of East Sea Province after all, but why did it seem that his life was not important in the eyes of these old fellows? Feeling a little irritated, Wu Qi did not enter the city. Instead, he squatted beside a ditch beside the city gate, resting his chin on his hands and pondering for a long time. He carefully pondered what had happened today, pondered over the cause and effect of the incident, and came up with dozens of possibilities. Finally, he raised his middle finger to the sky. "You have guts. I won't play with you, will I?" With a belly full of resentment, Wu Qi gritted his teeth and walked into Liangzhu. After all, as the newly promoted Marquis of East Sea Province, he had no choice but to swallow the insult and humiliation. Even though he was used as bait, he had no choice but to swallow the insult and humiliation. But this was not the end of it. No matter who was behind all this, they would have to pay the price for using Wu Qi as bait. Wu Qi would not spare any of these people who had underestimated Wu Qi today, who had used him as a tool and put him in danger. "Just you wait and see." With a gloomy face, Wu Qi asked the passers-by for the address of King Yangshan's mansion, then walked along the main road towards it. Wu Qi would remember what had happened this time. When he returned to his own territory, the East Sea Province that now belonged to him, he would devote all his attention to developing the underhand sect, recuperating and accumulating his strength, and when he had enough strength and influence, he would come back and settle the score with these people. Wu Qi suddenly felt that compared to Gao Chenli and those supreme oracles in the imperial court, those oracles from the secret palace were so cute, including Wu Changqi and his brothers. This included Wu Changqi and his brothers. Even if they were a little ridiculous, they were true to themselves and were much more adorable than Gao Chenli and the other eccentric people. Gnashing his teeth, Wu Qi came to the front gate of King Yangshan's mansion. He looked up at the two ancient doors cast from bronze in front of him, then cupped his fist and bowed to the hundreds of heavily armored soldiers standing in front of them. Please go in and report that Tan Lang, the Marquis of East Sea Province, is here to see Gao, King Yufeng. He had already thought of leaving Yuxiong Plain and returning to the East Sea Province to develop his own power. But, as a matter of etiquette, Wu Qi had to inform Gao before he left. After all, everyone now believed that Wu Qi was Gao's advisor, and he had already been branded with Gao's mark. Right after Wu Qi finished his words, a tall and burly middle-aged man, clad in a luxurious brocade robe, suddenly walked out from the side door. He looked like a man from the Longbow Kingdom. Behind him were dozens of burly, arrogant men. They looked like a pack of lions and tigers, and when they stared at someone, their eyes were filled with a bloodthirsty gleam. Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, the middle-aged man turned to look at Wu Qi and said, "Are you Tan Lang? The Tan Lang who cultivates both fleshly body and magic under Third Brother's command? Hee, boy, kneel down before me and swear that you will only obey my orders for the rest of your life. Otherwise, you won't get any benefits today." Amidst the strange laughter, a burly man with a pitch-black body and a pair of blue eyes behind the middle-aged man leaped in front of Wu Qi, slapping his palms forcefully on Wu Qi's shoulder, trying to force him to kneel before the middle-aged man. Wu Qi flew into a rage. He had just been insulted by Gao Chenli, and now this guy was provoking him as well. Ignoring that he was in King Yangshan's mansion, Wu Qi snapped, "Are you courting death?" Scram! Black dragon scales covered Wu Qi's right fist as he thrust it toward the burly man's chest. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.